Right, Jimmy, we're gonna get out of here. What's that? Is there an on off switch? This, yeah, right here on the side. Thank you. Yeah, does it work? Yeah, it's yeah. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I would ask if they can hear you on Zoom. That's the microphone. They can see.
Good, we're ready. We are being recorded. Okay, welcome. My name is Curtis Munger. I know a lot of you. I've known a lot of you for a long time, and we're so glad that you're here. We've got people that traveled from China, so they've had a very long trip, you know, on the other side of the planet. We're really glad you're here. And I just wanted to give you a welcome from New Mexico State University. I'm Professor Emeritus here. I'm retired from USDA. So we're going to have myself give you a welcome, and the president of IUSS.
We hope so.
We hope so. That he's in Italy, so it's 6 p.m. in Italy, so maybe he started the weekend, but we hope he will join us.
He promised at least.
Yeah, and Maria Bronikova. Okay, Maria's been the one that organized all of this, and Maria is the chair of the Paleoenvironmental Commission and IUSS, and Elizabeth is co-chair. So Elizabeth joined us from Mexico, and you've been very helpful in organizing all of this as well. So. Here.
Yeah, we had some issues here. There's the Zoom crash.
We had a Zoom crash, okay. So, and Blake Bundy is an undergraduate in the plant and environmental sciences. So he's an IT guy, and he's always rescuing us, like right now. We've had a Zoom crash. So we appreciate that. But let me go ahead just a bit. So many of you know, every state in the United States has a land grant university. It was established back in the 1860s to include agriculture, to include engineering, mechanical arts, as it was referred to. So in New Mexico, it's New Mexico State University that is the land grant university. So that's where the soil scientists are, but also we have a really good geology department historically. And we've got Dr. Greg Mack. I'll come back to that. But Dr. Greg Mack, who many of you know, wrote a paper, and he asked me to join him as co-author, the classification of paleosols. And so, you know, every now and then you get into a Google Scholar or whatever, and you'll see how many citations you've had. If you want to have a paper with a lot of citations, write a classification paper. Because he done, you know, people, you know, talk about paleosol, now, you know, Mac and all, 1993, that sort of thing. But anyway, Greg was scheduled to be here the last day to do the pre-quaternary paleosols. And he's got a lot of really good ones, you know, in the Mesozoic, in the Permian, going way back. But due to illness in his family, he couldn't make it. So we've substituted that last day, the pre-quaternary paleosols, for a trip to Sierra Blanca. So that's the about 2.5 hours from here. But the highest southernmost glaciated peak in North America, there's a cirque up there, remains. And so, and look at a lava flow. So, all right, we're ready. I wanted to make a link between New Mexico State University and paleopathology. This is a good way of doing it. So 1970, there was a paleopathology conference in Amsterdam. And Maria's putting together a newsletter article, and someone found this historic photograph, and they're trying to identify all the people that are in this. Came through, you know, Daniel on, and many names, Cabernet, Cubiana. I mean, there's many names here that I think folks that have been in the business of paleopathology for a while will recognize. And then there's this one guy sitting here that Maria thought was
Recording in progress.
that are in this picture. So I sent this around to some colleagues, and this guy here, over here, Bob Rudy. Yeah, here's Bob Rudy, and Bob had a really stellar career as a soil geomorphologist, geologist. He worked in the Midwest. You know, he did here. He worked in Africa. He did some work in Hawaii. So he was really, you know, had a broad background. Wrote a couple of classic books about the landscapes in Iowa, geomorphology. But Bob Rudy was one of the two initiators of the Desert Soil Geomorphology Project. And the other one was Guy Smith. Guy Smith is referred to as the architect of soil taxonomy. So in the 50s, big push to remap the United States. And the idea was to set up some soil geomorphic projects in regions. And the idea was to develop fundamental principles that can be used to make better soil maps. So this is the Desert Project. Started right here. Bob Rudy came down 1957, Lee Geil. So Bob Rudy was the geologist, Lee Geil, the soil scientist. They got going. But the idea was, okay, if you're going to make an accurate soil map, how do you know what's down there? Well, you can drill a bunch of holes and connect dots, but it's not really an accurate map. The way to make an accurate map is really to understand where are those young sediments? Where are the old geomorphic surfaces that have developed argillic horizons and here calcic and petrocalcic, right? To really understand the genesis of the landscape. So that was the focus of the soil desert geomorphology project. Like I said, it started in 1957. This was they looked around University of Arizona, potential site. UC Riverside, potential site. Utah State, potential site. But it just happened that all the things they were looking for was here. They had land-grant university, had a library, and that was major importance back in those days. And had lab space, office space, and it was representative of the basin and range that bends all the way a huge area in the southwestern United States. So it had similar topography, parent materials, soil age, so everything from historic deposits younger than 100 years, like in Copiston accumulations, and all the way back to really the Plias in terms of age, climatic history, ecology. So it was able to look at one factor, to keep all the other factors, the 4 factors constant, and vary one of these at a time to really get an assessment of how soil development was taking place. So they decided it was basically really 200 square mile, 400 square mile area around here, and not only the geomorphic desert project, but the Hornot experimental range. Now you're getting up into just here. What's going on? But principles like, how old is the soil? Is it the same age as the geomorphic surface? And okay, yeah, you get a radiocarbon date from heterogenic carbonate, you get a number. What does that number mean? And the delta C13 value, what does that mean? So these were the fundamental principles that they were looking at. That's what we're going to talk about on the field excursion. Is basically every site, we're going to talk about soil memory. We're going to talk about these fundamental principles of how not only the soil profile, both pedogenically and stratigraphically, but how the landscape remembers. So with that, I just wanted to say welcome, and Eduardo, is he ready to go?
Yes.
Is?
He is.
Okay, so we'll turn it over to the president of the IUSS for his welcome. And then after that, Maria will give some announcements. Can you just take that?
They should be able to take.
Okay.
You need to unmute yourself first.
Edoardo, could you
Hello,
unmute?
can you hear me?
Yeah,
Good.
great.
Okay.
Okay, fine. Very glad to be with you again, although remotely. And actually, I cannot see many of you, but I see your names. So, okay, now there is a view of of the room. Okay, very nice. Thank you. And it is a great pleasure for me because, as probably you know, I used to chair the Paleontology Commission in the past. And actually, the Paleontology Commission was created within the IUSS just under my chairing. So I am very proud of it. And I perfectly know that the paleontology community has remained strong and very active during the years. So it is always a reference for the entire IUSS. I have some slides to show, if it is possible, to share my screen.
Yep, should be able to share.
Because I would like to take this opportunity to talk about the IUSS a little bit, if it is possible. But let's see if I find a way to share the right. Okay. Can you see my screen? Or not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Actually, it seems that it should be shared. Can you see something? Because the message here is that my screen is shared.
We see it in Zoom, not on screen. It's this sort of technical problem.
Yeah, I think this is.
Yeah.
technical.
we're
Okay.
trying to solve it.
Anyway, I can also talk without showing the slides. I just want to recall what is the IUSS. Probably most of you know it very well. And it is important to underline some things that sometimes are under-evaluated. And we all know that the IUSS is the Global Union of Soil Scientists, and it has the aim to promote all branches of soil science and so on and so forth. But what is not so well acknowledged is that the IUSS is a free and autonomous organization financed primarily by member contribution, which provide a reputation for soil scientists and at the same time a collaborative space, like this one of the Paleopedagogy Commission. And actually, the IUSS structure is based on two pillars. First of all, it is a union of national societies or academies, the full members, and it is an organization of soil scientists, the individual members. The full members of the IUSS are currently 79 national soil science societies or academia, like for the United States. While the estimated individual members through the national soil science societies is about 50,000, taking into consideration that just China is formed by around 20,000 soil scientists. And beside that, the IUSS holds relationships with 8 regional societies, the African Soil Science Society, the East and Southeast Asia Federation of Soil Science Societies, the European Confederation of Soil Science Societies, the Federation of Eurasian Soil Science, Latin American, East Africa, Pacific Regional Society of Soil Science, and the Central Asian Soil Science Society. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. The structure of the IUSS is based also on other two pillars. One is governance and the other one is science. Governance is made of the council, which is the assembly of all full members, the executive and the president's committees, the secretariat, which is responsible for management. You must know that we made a big step forward for the secretariat because starting from this year, we are able to have a full-time secretary within a rather big secretariat. Of course, there is a transition phase because we used to have the secretariat in Vienna, and now it's in Rome, Italy. But I think that things are going to increase, which is very important for having more effectiveness of our activities. And then there is science, which is the strongest part of our organization, made of 4 divisions, 21 commissions, 17 working groups, and a forum. You all know that there are the 4 divisions. The first one is soil in space and time, and paleopedology is a commission of this division. Then there is the soil properties and processes, the division 3, soil use and management, division 4, the role of soils in sustaining society and environment. And then there are the several working groups, 9 among division 1, 2 division 2, 4 division 3, and 2 division 4. Of course, individual member can be interested in one or more commission or working group belonging to different divisions. One of the improvement of the system will be to put interest of the individual members to the different commission and working groups through the website, which is going to be renovated in the next week. Possibly, you know that the main outputs of the IUSS are the Congress, the World Congress, held every 4 years, plus one inter-Congress, and there are special congresses, like the Centennial, which is going to be held in Italy next year in Florence. Besides, sorry, is there any problem?
No, now we can see your screen.
Okay.
No, continue, please.
Sorry?
Continue, please.
Okay. So every year we organize in between 14 and 80 main scientific events organized by division, commission, and working groups like this one that we are just holding today. And then another very important activity, which is somehow underestimated, is the organization of the World Soil Day on the 5th of December in collaboration with the FAO, which see more than 2,000 events organized every year. Then we publish 2 bulletins at about 12 alerts every year, and 1 or 2 books also in open source. Another very important outcome of the IUSS activity is the awarding of awards, prizes, and medals. We have awards and prizes given at the IUSS level, which are basically the Dokuchaev and the von Liebing Awards for basic and applied researchers. And then we have the Jeju Awards for young researchers, and the IUSS Distinguished Service Medal for outstanding world soil leaders who have translated soil science into action. And then we have all the medal and prizes given by the different division, commission, and even working groups, which are very much important for rising interest of the individual member to the specific disciplines. Finally, we have also our honorary members, and we promote every now and then individual members by other scientific organizations, such as the International Scientific Council, the International Science Council. This is an activity which is on increase, and I ask you to pay attention to the alert and our social media about the different opportunities given by us and the ISSC. Finally, there is this seed money, which is given every year to every division. You know that there is a sum of money given to every division for internal activities decided by the divisional committee, where every commission is represented. And we have also some money, we call it the stimulus fund, and from this year also project fund, that is a small amount of money given for specific activities, as you know, like participation to event, grants, and other activities, but also project that is seed money for small project or to initiate research project that will be then financed by other institutions. You know that we have our website, we have social media on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And we have also a strategic plan, which is published on our website with 9 strategic goals. I will not go into the details, but I just want to remind you that the first strategic goal is improvement of soil awareness. And this goal will be the subject of my presentation on Monday and my participation to the roundtable. So I will finish just reminding you that there will be next year the centennial of the IUSS, of the IUSS in Italy, the celebration of the centennial. The website is running for several months now. The session proposal has been already settled, and now it will start the submission of abstracts. Then, always in the year 2024, we are going to have our Inter-Congress meeting in China in October. And finally, in 2026, we are going to hold our 23rd World Congress, always in China, in Nanjing. And both websites are already in online, and you can check the details of the two events there. Okay. I think that is all for now.
Good. Are there any questions for Eduardo? Well, we want to thank you very much for interrupting your Saturday evening. It's Saturday morning here, so we really appreciate you taking time to talk to us.
Okay, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edoardo.
Bye-bye.
It was
Okay.
great.
So
Thank you.
see you on Monday then.
Great.
Yeah, see you.
Goodbye. Have a
Bye-bye.
nice work. Have a nice work.
So now I would like to greet you on behalf of IUSS Paleopedology Commission and INCRA Paleopedology Working Group here in Las Cruces. Actually, we had a long way to this event because it was supposed to be held in Russia, actually, the 14th Symposium and Field Workshop on Paleopedology in 2020, but everyone knows what happened in 2020, and we shifted it for 2021, and we also haven't managed to do it because the COVID was still with us. And the next year, last year, we were forced actually to cancel it in Russia because, as everyone knows, Russia now fight against Ukraine, and it's horrible conflict which influences all the areas of life, actually, all over the world, unfortunately. But let's hope that one day I will be able to greet you in Russia again, but not in the not soon, I guess. Yes, and still we are here, and I'm happy that you all came here, and I'm happy that we have plenty of online participants of this big event. And I would like to mention this financial support of Division 1, IUSS Division 1, which allowed us to support some people, letting them to come here. And what else? We have quite an extensive program, and I'm excited about these days of the symposium, but I'm much more excited about the following field trip because actually during COVID times, which the COVID brought bad things, of course, and good things, so we can now have something like 2/3 of participants online, which was not possible before. But one of the most important things we missed during COVID time, it was field trips and the field workshops. And it is quite a long tradition of the commission, Paleosols Commission, to meet not in auditorium, but in field near the soil pits and soil cuts, and discuss real science there, not here, because it's much more exciting, as I think, and we will have such an opportunity soon. And I should say that I came here in Las Cruces a year ago, and I found here, I would say, real treasures, scientific treasures, and I'm happy that we, with Curtis, first of all, Curtis could show all of you these treasures. So glad to see you here, and let's start. Probably, Elizabeth, would you like to add something? Few words, probably. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria, Curtis, and all of you who joined this great conference and excursion. Not everyone, but at least those who are here in the room. And I think that Maria was precise to say that we love to be in the field. And this opportunity to go to the field and see the objects and to discuss directly in the field is wonderful. And this is a tradition of the commission, Paleopedology Commission. So welcome. I am not the leader of this conference, but I am also glad of being here with a lot of pressure from Maria. I'm sorry, because I was in Rome and I was in other conferences, and money is not enough to be everywhere, but I tried and I am now here. So welcome to everybody, and I hope that we can enjoy the conference. Thank you. Thank you.
Sergey Gorechkin is online. Sergey Gorechkin.
Okay, would you like to say a few words?
He, yes.
Okay,
Sergey, yeah.
go ahead.
No, yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
I tried to find a background, and I think I have found just to be closer to you, to New Mexico. And so I just want to say that this conference is mostly prepared by Commission 1.6 Paleopedology, but I am the chair of the Commission 1.2. It is Commission on Soil Geography. So, no, because you know that paleopedology is in charge of time and soil geography in charge of space. So we are very complementary to each other, because it's not possible to understand soil behavior in space, because everywhere we can see some relic features in soils, and we cannot explain soil behavior in space without understanding time, and vice versa. You cannot understand soil behavior in time without knowing soil in space, because the time that we are living on the planet, everybody of us, is several decades, and the time for the whole civilization is first millennia, and you know that soil development is embraces much more time than even the time of mankind's civilization. That's why we need to find some responses for our concepts, find them in space, in different soils of different ages, and so on and so on. So I hope that this conference will be very fruitful, and I think that it will bring just a good cooperation between our two commissions. Thank you, and see you soon.
Thank you, Sergey. Appreciate it. Any questions for Sergey? All right. If not, let's move right on to the first speaker. And so, Blake, go ahead and bring up Joe Lisa. Yeah. And see.
Oh, Joseph is here.
Right.
Joseph
See,
did.
I'm thinking, if he stands here.
Yeah.
Would be the best place. And let, oh, well, that's okay. We got the camera. We'll zoom around where you want to stand. Yeah.
I'll try to stand still. I hope somebody is gonna tell me when my time is getting,
Yes, we will.
because I don't wait to see that, so. Well, first of all, thank you very much to Maria and the organizers of this meeting, and also hello, friends here and on Zoom. It's good to see everyone. I also need to quickly acknowledge the funding source for the long line of research that goes into this talk, and collaborators who aren't listed as co-authors. I moved Peter to the front because I know he's here. So the context for my talk is in semi-arid, not truly arid desert regions in the US Great Plains and northern China, looking at dune fields that are now either fully or partially stabilized by vegetation, but have very well documented episodes of activity during the Holocene, and also Holocene loss that's closely connected to the dune fields in the Great Plains. And the research of myself and my collaborators on these dune fields and loess deposits really emphasized early on extensive use of OSL dating, which would determine either the time of, would hopefully determine the time since light exposure during sand deposition or loess deposition. And we use those ages to identify particular episodes of more extensive activity in both the Great Plains and China. But even as we were publishing some of these early results, there were papers coming out that were questioning this whole approach, questioning whether the episodes we identified were real or were mostly an artifact of sampling strategy or just not enough samples. And then my collaborators in China and I further complicated the issue by arguing that there was good evidence for coexistence of both active and stable dunes in many northern China dune fields. But in regard to the first question, what we've always argued and still argue is you have to look at the soils. You have to look at the paleosols within, in this case, loess deposits in the Great Plains, but also the dune fields. There are paleosols that separate major intervals of more rapid loess accumulation, and you can correlate those paleosols using their characteristics and OSL dating across large areas of the Great Plains in this case, but also within the dune fields of the Great Plains and in China, there are paleosols separating intervals of dune activity. It's a lot more complicated in the case of the dune fields because of frequent truncation or complete erosion of paleosols. So you have to look at many sites, hundreds of sites, preferably, to be able to confirm that a certain time was a period of stability or activity. And then we further used the paleosols in this work in China as supporting evidence for the coexistence of active and stable dunes at many times during the Holocene in those dune fields. Although in a period of more widespread soil formation and stability in the middle Holocene. So the soils have always been, the buried soils have always been a critical part of our research on these dune fields and Holocene loess. But from a pedological point of view, they're often not very interesting looking. At first, they're thin, weakly developed soils. Some are thicker and more prominent, but they almost entirely lack more significant V horizon development or profile differentiation, which pedologists and paleopedologists usually get excited about. So what I want to try to convince you of today is that there are some very interesting issues related to these paleosols in dune fields and Holocene lush that are important to consider from the point of view of paleopedology. So I'll first look at this point and then talk about upbuilding or aggradational or accumulative, whatever you want to call it, pedogenesis in both dunes and lush. So in both cases, it's really important to recognize what I think is the amazing level of bioturbation in dunes, especially also coarse, sandy lush, easy to dig, well aerated. These are camp mounds that formed within a couple of months after a fire burned this dune in Montana. I also want to emphasize, though, that although there are burrows of animals that extend very deep, much of the bioturbation is concentrated within a relatively shallow zone because a lot of it is carried out by animals feeding below the surface on roots or other soil animals. So following up from that, one of the things that I often hear from people working on dunes in other parts of the world is we don't have paleosols in places like Southern Africa or Australia. But there are many zones in those soils. In fact, sometimes the whole thickness of the soils of the dune in those areas lacks sedimentary structures, which are almost always there when the sand is initially deposited. And those structures are removed by progressive bioturbation, in this case, by insects. And so it's really important to note zones without sedimentary structures and evidence of bioturbation as evidence of a period of surface stability, even very brief, and as the precursor to more advanced pedogenesis in dunes. It's very important to document this kind of feature in detail. I'll also note that the vertical extent of mixing, this is important for later on, the vertical extent of mixing here is very limited in these burrows that are backfilled by the animal. It's only the length of the animal's body. So keep that in mind for a later point. Another maybe less obvious feature of very young soils in dune fields, and in particular, that is also very important, is that even in very weakly developed young dune soils like this one, which is here, there's a small but significant accumulation of silt, which I would argue is dust, although more research is needed on that and on the dust provenance. And that is enough to alter soil hydraulic properties and probably subsequent pedogenesis, as well as moisture availability for plants on the dunes. So we can see that accumulation of silt in data collected over many years by the U.S. Soil Survey Lab on Great Plains dune soils. You can see the increase in silt here. We can also see it in our laser diffraction particle size analysis of dune soils, where the surface horizon, the weak A horizon, has much more silt than deeper layers in the dune. And very interesting to me anyway is that difference in silt content is enough to shift the moisture retention curve of these soils significantly towards greater moisture retention at the same pressure head. And also changes unsaturated hydraulic conductivity curves. That in itself probably influences the subsequent course of pedogenesis in these soils, among other reasons why it's important. So subtle features, but very important to note in studying both dunes and lush. Now to the soils at the other end of the range of prominence, these very thick, dark soils, still without prominent V horizons, that we've often thought of as soils that were upbuilt through ongoing sedimentation. They occur in dune fields as well as in lush, where that idea is better established, I'll focus on a well-known loess paleosol to talk about some of the evidence that we could use to look to test that idea that these soils are upbuilt by sedimentation over time. You may have heard of the Brady soil. I hope you've heard of the Brady soil, a key marker of the Pleistocene-Holocene transition in the Great Plains, actually from north-south into Kansas, from North Dakota to Kansas. So forming over several thousand years, very thick, dark soil. At one particular site, the Juanita site in Nebraska, we've done a lot of work to try to get at this idea of upbuilding and whether we can actually develop a chronology for different parts of the soil over time. And so at that site, we've done intensive OSL and radiocarbon dating, paired samples through the thickness of the Brady soil. And both methods produced parallel trends, which was actually quite surprising. Seems consistent with upbuilding. The OSL ages should be a little older than the radiocarbon ages because the sediment has to be deposited and then the carbon has to be added after the sediment's there. That's consistent with the error in both dating methods. But you can look at this and say, yes, the soil was built up by sedimentation over time and carbon was added progressively. However, there's lots of reason to believe that if you have really deep, pervasive bioturbation through the thickness of a soil like this, you can get a very similar trend in OSL ages, even if the ground surface is stable, even if it's not being built up by sedimentation. And of course, radiocarbon ages often get older with depth in the soil just because of slower turnover of the organic carbon at depth. So how can we start to rule out those alternative explanations? And before I talk about that, I'll just note that if the upbuilding model is more or less correct, you can actually create age models, which are the way to do this chronology now, and pick out what part of this sequence is related to the younger Dryas, for example. But that's dependent on the idea that the soil is built up by ongoing sedimentation. So to me, the single most convincing piece of evidence for the upbuilding model is that finely defined, kind of finely spaced peaks of fine grain size are correlative over distances of 1.2 kilometers, for example, within a local area. So you see these little peaks of grain size, of fine grain size, that in this core and in this road cut section. To me, it's hard to believe that those would be preserved through deep, pervasive bioturbation of the whole profile. And to some extent, some of these peaks are actually preserved over much greater distances. So that seems to be clear evidence for upbuilding with different grain size being deposited at different times during that upbuilding. We also looked at, even in more kind of extensive replication, we sampled multiple profiles in one road cut for organic carbon isotopic analysis, and then also looked at a core a kilometer away and other road cuts farther away. And there also we get very similar profiles of del-13C of organic matter. And by the way, if the radiocarbon ages simply reflect slower turnover at depth within the soil profile, that alone would actually produce a trend in the opposite direction of del-13C. Okay, so it would actually produce more negative ratios with depth if you're just looking at turnover of organic carbon slower or faster below a stable ground surface. In addition, although it's a little noisier, most sites show this double peak in organic carbon, which also doesn't seem consistent with the deep, pervasive bioturbation. Instead, the way we've interpreted these data is primarily, not entirely, but primarily as a record of vegetation change through the last glacial, interglacial transition with some fluctuation after that during the Holocene. This ratio primarily reflects the abundance of C4 grasses, the relative abundance, the fraction of C4 grasses inputting organic matter to these soils, which is related in the Great Plains, primarily to temperature going from south to north, but also some effect of moisture from east and west, and both short-term and long-term effects of moisture actually on C4 grass abundance. So we have a great record of that here, assuming that the soil is primarily built up by sedimentation over time, so we can interpret this at least approximately as a time series. So I'll just wrap up by saying there also are very thick soils which probably preserve similar records, although we haven't studied them as much, in the dune fields of northern China, where these records would go through the Middle Holocene. And Ron Goebel was lead author on a paper of a well-documented case in the Nebraska Stanfield's dune field of the Great Plains. So to wrap up, it's essential to recognize the paleosols and study them in working on Holocene dunes and lush. In some cases, recognition is not that difficult. It's interpretation that's the important part. So, thank you.
Question two for Joe. So, Joe, did you look at organic carbon content with depth in those QFA horizons to see that the depth function is highly irregular? That's usually a good signature for human soil. Certainly, I've done that a lot in woodless soils. But I would think the same would occur in lusterized soil.
It does vary. It does vary, back and forth to some extent. I think that curve is somewhat smoothed out in these well-drained, non-floodplain settings because there is bioturbation over 15 or 20 centimeters, at least very active bioturbation. So I think we're not going to see that as much in these, but you do see some of our data from the Brady soil at Juanita shows clearly a double peak of carbon. Yeah.
You showed us beautiful soils with thick molic horizon, and you told that the soil was upfilled with continuously added silt and bioturbation. So, but many people who knows many journalisms and molly soils in Eurasia, they believe that mostly the thick horizon are developed in deep activity of zootropation, especially when we can recognize many crotovinas. Yes?
Yeah.
We imagine that it is due to burrowing animals, but from your presentation, it is rather prevailing opinion that the thick molic horizon are created by shallow, very shallow bioturbation and upbuilding. So what is the prevailing mechanism of formation of thick molic horizons in your view?
Well, two answers. First, I think both mechanisms are entirely possible. And second, I think you have to look at the details of the type of bioturbation and which kinds of bioturbation really mix the soil thoroughly. So we see deep crotovinas because they're distinct from the surrounding matrix, which means that most of the matrix is not mixed all the way down from the surface. And even with a crotovina, the distance that the soil has moved may not be very far. Even if there's a contrast, the darker, between dark and light, there may be darker material not far above. So, and I've seen burrows backfilled by animals so many times that I think the distance of bioturbation, the vertical distance is often exaggerated. Thank you. We're done.
Oh,
We have one question.
Where's from?
Sergey has a question. Sergey, can you ask your question, please?
Could you hear me?
Yes.
Great. First, it is so nice to see you, Joe, after so many years, and to listen to your new research. My question is the following. You are studying the inland dunes in Nebraska. However, there are also a lot of coastal dunes. Maybe the nearest to you are those at the Mexican Gulf Coast in Louisiana, Texas, and further to the south on the Mexican coast in Veracruz. We study them there. Do you have any idea if the activity of dune sedimentation and also pedogenesis in the inland dunes is synchronous or asynchronic, or these are absolutely independent systems with the coastal dunes? Do you have any experience of correlation of these objects?
I have no experience working on coastal dunes, but from what I understand of that research, it can be, the controls can be largely independent of the climatic variation that drives the inland dunes. Because there are so many other variables, wind energy, sand availability on the beach, other controls on vegetation, even people walking on the dunes can be a big influence on coastal dunes. So mostly independent, although there certainly is a climatic effect on coastal dunes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Very
Yes, in our research, we had a feeling that, yes, there is a certain climatic control also in the coastal dunes. So we could compare our results. Thank you.
good. Okay, is Michael Jankowski. Michael, are you on?
Is he? I cannot see him.
Okay, don't believe it's here.
You see? Vlad, shake.
Okay.
He's actually, he should be, probably we should just jump to the next.
Good. We'll jump to the next one and
Yeah.
be on time.
Yeah, we are on time.
No.
Okay, yeah, Vladimir. Okay, is Vladimir also online?
Yeah.
Did you see the comment, though, that Sergey put that he could not see Joe's slides change? Oh. I saw that.
Did anyone else not see
there.
the slides change?
That it stayed on the title slide. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Did anyone else have this issue?
Or it could be specific to Sergey is what you're thinking and not universal.
I'm not sure.
Better to ask some people if they can see everything.
Whatever was here, something.
Yes, yes. That-
yeah, because here I had, yeah, I had changing.
Who was changing on that one?
Huh?
Okay. Might be something.
No, next is Sheinkman. Sheinkman. Vlad Sheinkman? Yes, he is.
Jankowski, you see, and Jankowski. Okay.
Jankowski is not here,
Okay,
but
Vladimir.
probably he will join later. He should be.
And I am here to chair the presentation.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
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 Okay.
Again.
Everywhere. He's everywhere.
But not here.
Unfortunately.
It's good.
Yes, that's
Yes.
good. Yes, thank you. Proceed.
Okay, yes, the beginning. Okay, dear colleagues, I'm very glad to present you our contribution. Me and my co-author, Dr. Sedov, want to present you the information in respect of Pleistocene Paleosols of North-Western Siberia as a new source of important paleogeographical consultant and gaining to environment evolution. First of all, there are a few scenarios of development of North-Western Siberia, and they are very cardinally different. Why? The first scenario is of giant cover glaciation. Yes, search of Pleistocene paleosols are unpromising in this case, because of under any ice sheets impossible to develop for paleosols. The second scenario is of limited glaciation. Search of Pleistocene paleosols are possible in this case, and their findings are probable. But the researchers do not want to search these paleosols because of tradition. Under the ice sheets, there is no paleosols. Okay. The third scenario is of dry and very cold desert. It's only possible to search climatic extreme Pleistocene paleosols. And the last scenario is absence of any cover glaciation and predomination of the low temperature permafrost development. In this case, such of Pleistocene paleosols are possible, and their findings are to be regular. So, which metrics is to be founded in respect to review paleosols in North-Western Siberia? We suggest that this is the last scenarios of absence of ice sheets and predomination of the low temperature paleosols. Why? Look at this map. Factors determining continental and very cold climatic conditions in Siberia confirm this situation. Why? Because of the air mass with moisture cannot reach the heart of Siberia, and the permafrost only can predominate in this area. So for all Pleistocene, it's possible to be more or less dry conditions and more or less conditions with moisture. That's all. Only low temperature permafrost. And this map confirms such a conclusion. We can see a very big distribution of ice wedge, polygonal ice wedge. And this is indicator of very strong conditions on very low and cold temperature situation with low temperature permafrost. And the most part of Siberia is under such conditions, and only the north part of West Siberia is situated under such conditions in the north of West Siberia. However, along the boundary between the distribution of polygonal ice wedge, we can see at present the ice wedge pseudomorphs. And what's interesting, along the wall of the former ice wedge, we can see the layers with the paleosols. So it's the instrument to find paleosols in specific paleosols in the area of the former ice wedge. We began to find such situations, and we have found it. The most ancient paleosols is of MIS5. We have revealed it in the east part of the Siberian Urals, in the center part of the high river terraces, about 40 meters. And what's interesting, that these these Paleosols, we have dated it as approximately 100,000 years before present. And these Paleosols have been dissected also by pseudomorphs after the polygonal ice age. And these Paleosols have two levels. The upper level is conforms the cold conditions, and as I said, it's dissected by pseudomorph. But the lower layers is the warmer layers, and it's conditions of taiga region. Some analysis from the point of micromorphology confirms this situation. We have C P horizon, we have C A B horizon with clay coat, and all of these indicators of porous pedogenesis. Also, different paleontological materials was revealed in within these paleosols. Macro-rest of plants and insects confirmed forest ecosystems. The next paleosols is of MIS3. This is exactly cryohydromorphic paleosols. In this case, we have revealed it in the section Zelony Ostrov, also in the east part of Siberian Oval. What's interesting, different analysis from the point of morphology confirms that this is exactly cryohydromorphic paleosols. For example, different cryoturbation, cryogenic separation, iron nodules, that's confirmed glaciation, and so on. The modern analogs of these paleosols is the hydromorphic cryosols found in tundra landscapes above shallow permafrost. Is distributed in different places in Siberia. And the short paleosols is of MIS2. It's very good distributed along the West Siberia, and in this case, this also the Turkey section. On the picture, we can see very good expressed the pseudomorphs after the polygonal ice wedge with different date. And what's interesting that the hydromorphic paleosol that firstly was on the base of seasonal salt level, after the ice wedge began to thaw, the material of the soil slips down in along the walls of the ice wedge and fills the area of the ice wedge. So in this case, we can recognize different part of the cryohydromorphic paleosols to date it and to recognize it. Also, we realize some analysis from the point of micro morphology, and it confirms this exactly the hydromorphic paleosols. What's interesting, in the top of all terraces, there is the modern podzol soil. It's thin, but along the axis of the pseudomorphs, he began to be bigger. And we dated this podzol, and it began to form about 6,000–7,000 years before present. So it's possible also to recognize this soil as paleosols, but they're conjugated with the modern layers. Anyway, at present we construct some scheme with all paleosols, and we guess that it's possible to distinguish at present a few levels with different paleosols. First of all, the paleosol of MIS 5, the next MIS 3, and the next MIS 2, and in the end, in the top of the terraces, the modern podzol that began to form about 6,000-7,000 years ago. And the level of MS2 is the most expressed, and we distinguish this level as the specific Sartanian MIS2 cryogenic Paleosols horizon, because of many material confirms this situation. So one way or another, we have revealed Paleosols in North-Western Siberia. At present, it's a fact. Thank you for your attention.
Good. Dear Vladimir, we're right on time. Who has questions about North-Western Siberia? Yes, Elizabeth. Yes.
Hi, Vlad. Thanks a lot for the presentation. And I have a question because you constructed a chronological frame and how this frame can be destroyed or by cryoturbation processes can somehow mix the layers, and then the chronological frame is not completely correct.
I think my co-author could answer this question because who knows these problems better than me.
If I am allowed, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Yes, I think better I will be in charge of answering questions, because all thoughts of Professor Sheinkman are maybe now in his homeland, which is Israel, under attack since today. So maybe it will be better that I answer the questions. Yes, of course, cryoturbation, and not only cryoturbation, presents some difficulties for dating and in general for study of these paleosols. Other processes are large-scale migration of organic components in these landscapes, because there is a lot of soluble organic matter, so it could also affect radiocarbon dating. However, in our sequences, which we studied, paleosols are buried rather quickly and deeply. So we think the dates obtained for MIS3 and MIS5 paleosols are quite reliable. Difficulties are with the datings from the paleosol corresponding to isotope stage 2 to the last part of this stage, practically terminal Pleistocene. These paleosols are very close to the Holocene soil. But organic materials, which we found in this nice ice wedge pseudomorphs shown by Vladimir, are also rather deep, and organic matter there is very different from alluvial humus materials from podzols. So we hope that these dates also have sense. However, I think, by the way, these dates were obtained by Dr. Zazovskaya, present there in the in the auditorium, so maybe she could give some additional comments. Hopefully, these dates are also reliable, but maybe some additional treatment, additional cleaning of these organic materials are needed.
I had just one quick follow-up. I apologize if I missed it, Sergey, but what are the sediments that were burying the Paleosols during MIS 4 and 3? Was it alluvium? Is it loess?
In all cases, these are, which we studied, these are alluvial sediments. In fact, most of our work was done on the high Pleistocene terraces of big Siberian rivers.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Vladimir. Thank you, Sergey, for filling that in. Thank you very much.
Many thanks.
Do we have a Dr. Present?
Yes, she's here.
Okay.
Share.
Let's
You could unmute yourself and
Yeah. If you would unmute, please, and share your screen. It's a good way to ask her to unmute.
yeah.
Where it's her turn.
Yeah. Maybe she is waiting for the presentation.
Yes, because probably you should announce your presentation for.
Hello, can you hear us?
Hello. Oh, I'm delayed.
See you, but we cannot hear you.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So,
I believe your connection is a little bad.
Proceed, if there's any way to improve the quality.
On the our end.
Okay, go ahead and proceed, please, with your presentation. Share your screen.
Can you share your screen?
yeah, but this problem is
It happens to us all.
Presenter is not here. He's not here.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay, so after this, we go to.
And Michael still, so
Okay.
probably it's time for coffee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good, good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Because we-
thank you. Now we can see your screen. Yes.
Okay, is this visible?
Yes.
Hello. Yes. Okay. Now, hello everyone. I'm Anjali from India, and I'm gonna talk today about Paleosol narratives reading digenetic and phylogenetic imprint in Lamata Formation, Central India. As we all know, Paleosols are the very prominent proxy to reconstruct paleo environment, but there are very persistent challenges like diagenesis, which can have imprints on the phylogenetic characteristics of the Paleosols. So I have studied the diagenetic characters and the phylogenetic characters of the Lamata Formation, that is the late Cretaceous formation present in Central India. This formation has its unique characteristics, that it is famous for the dinosaur dominated fauna of India, and it has the close proximity with the Deccan volcanics. Even it is the infratrapian with context to the Deccan volcanics. Deccan volcanics is the continental flood basalt of KT boundary.
Excuse
This
me,
is the stratigraph.
sorry, would you mind resharing your screen? I believe you don't have it on the presentation mode. If you stop sharing and reshare and just select screen instead.
Okay. There is
Okay, and then if you went to the presentation mode now to see if it.
Is it visible now?
I believe you might have still just shared just the PowerPoint. You'll have to share the entire screen in the things. Yeah.
Press F5.
If you press. We could see the PowerPoint. We just couldn't see the slideshow version. And then now if you go into your PowerPoint and go into the slideshow.
Yeah.
Is it visible or not?
Now you're just sharing the
Is it visible?
you're just sharing the website screen now.
She can send us accommodation and we'll go to it pocket page.
Okay.
Because it's served.
If you would like, you could also email the presentation to us.
The same.
I can.
Can you please give me some time? I'll restart
Yes, that's
the
okay.
presentation, then I'll do it. Yeah, I think you can give somebody else chance and then can it go?
Yes, that's okay. We'll go ahead and.
Somebody else.
If is there a way you could step out of the room?
Yeah, I'll do it and then I'll do it.
Yeah,
I think we'll take a break for a few minutes while we figure everything out.
yeah. So, and our next speaker, is not going to be available.
Yes.
Either.
Yeah.
So, what would work well is if we went ahead and took a coffee break now, then we'll reconvene at,
Yeah, but Angela can send us presentation because she can share it after.
okay, and we'll get her to send it and then we'll.
Yeah, if she
share it.
sends me, we
Okay.
can, yeah, share.
All right. How's that? Okay, coffee break. All right. Yeah. Great.
Please give me 1 second. Only 1 second.
Even two.
But no more than two.
No. Yeah. Can I share my screen? Yes?
Yes.
Uh-huh. So, this. It's okay?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Good. Yes. Can you see?
No,
Maybe
I
I can.
sharing.
Mm,
Oh no! Wait, actually, here we go. Yes.
Yeah, great.
how to? Oh, good. So, can I start?
Yes. I believe so.
So, good afternoon, dear colleagues. My name is Olga Tokareva, and today I present a team of researchers from different universities. And I want to present to you the preliminary result of the study about features of quaternary pedogenesis in lowest Paleosols sequence in Tajikistan. So, right. Good. As you know, Los Paleosols series are the most significant paleogeographic archives containing information about landscapes and climate changes. And on the Eurasian continent is the Eurasian Lost Belt in temperature latitude, and the tropics, subtropics, and arid zone of Central Asia. For example, the Iranian and Chinese Lost Plateau. And also famous and interesting is the Khormali Lost Plateau in the Afghan Tajik Depression, mainly in the southern part of Tajikistan. So these loss, I mean, in Tajikistan have Aeolian genesis. Loss accumulation is influenced by the western ice and the potential dust sources for the Tajik loss include Alpine desert in Turkmenistan and alluvial deposits from Piedmont and Sun basin, I mean river basin. So this area is also very important in Stone Age archaeology. They also store information about the source of deposits and the tools of an ancient Homo. For example, early and middle Paleolithic. The cultural horizon are associated with the Paleosols, and very few artifacts have been found in the loss. So it's very difficult, very important. Okay. Several paleogeographic reconstructions have been carried out on the Khormali Lost Plateau, for example, based on Paleosol characters and palynological data, where the authors connect the evolution of Paleosol of the upper pedacomplexes and paleoenvironments with subtropical semi-humid forest and forest steppe landscapes. And the Paleosols are predominantly classified as castanosomes. Also, research by Bronger and other authors suggest that the climates of the interglacial represented by the B or BT horizons of the Paleosols of Pleistocene age were similar to the Holocene climate. So about our research, studied region is located in the southern Tajikistan in Afghan Tajik Depression, which is surrounded by a mountain system of Hindu Kush, Pamir, and Hisar Alai. And this area is called Khormali Lost Plateau. There are lots of complete and detailed Lost Paleosols series and famous sections. For example, you can see, why it's not. This is different sections, and it named the Abimazar and Lahuti sections. Is the at least 3 sections, and if you can see, this is Abimazar section and different Lahuti sections. So they are located on the opposite the Lahuti village, if you want to see it on the map. Abimazar section is located on the right bend of the Abimazar River. The thickness of the entire outcrop is about 150 meters, and there are subaerial deposits underlined by the layers of alluvial sediments in the bottom. The whole Lost Paleosol series includes 7 pedacomplexes. In this presentation, we will look at the late quaternary sediments, such as pedacomplex 1 and 2. The last unit were deposits in the cold and arid conditions, I mean glacial stages, while the Paleosols were developed in the warm and humid period. So it's interglacial. We use in the field work methods like stratigraphy, paleosol description, sampling for analysis, and measurement of field magnetic susceptibility. And also we use micromorphology, granulometric, and chemical analysis. So what about our result? The upper part of the Abimazar section includes Holocene soil, pedocomplex 1 and 2, and their underlying loess. Pedocomplex 1 has a welted profile and formed during the MIS 5. Pedocomplex 2 is the compound pedocomplexes, and since it consists of two paleosols separated by a layer of loess, you can see it in the chart. And it has formed during the MIS 7. Micromorphology results show that loess layers have a massive microstructure and silty composition. In loess 1, there are crystals of lithogenic calcite and lots of clay and also shells. All layers, loess and paleosol, show signs of biological activity such as decomposed plant debris, carbonate micronodules near the porous coating, hypercoating, humid clay or humus clay relict aggregates, and coprolates of soil microfauna. And layer second inside pedocomplex 2 is high biogenical revoked and characterized by several stages of carbonate migration. An increase in the content of dendritic manganese organic nodules and hypercoating are observed. Unit loess 3 differs greatly from other loess layers in the high content of clay and lithogenic or minerals, so it can indicate of another source of material. And also it has sites of low biological activity. What about pedocomplexes and paleosols? The set of soil features is approximately the same in all paleosols. There are carbonate new formations, humus mineral and iron manganese nodules and hypercoating, and the silt infillings. Pedocomplex 1 consists of 3 paleosols that developed one on the top of the others, making it very difficult to separate them. It's a very big problem. AB horizons are diagnostic by the presence of structure, crumb crumbs microstructure, humus clay, no carbonate. It's interesting, no carbonate aggregates, and the remains of humus impregnation. Also, humus content in the horizon confirm micromorphological data. And in soil horizons, carbonates are leached from the ground mass. So calcite crystals in the ground mass are observed only at the very top of the horizon. Articular or needle-shaped calcite from microfauna excrements is sometimes found, which indicate the development of fungi mycelium. And this paleosols is preliminarily correlated by us with haptic calcisol by WRB 2022. The second paleosols has formed in slightly more humid conditions, which is probably responsible for the formation of the ABT horizon and the presence of thick silty infillings. Layered silt carbonate coating are also noted. You can see it in the photo. We believe that this soil can be classified as luvicalcic castonosome, but it's very difficult to separate first and second paleosols. Paleosol 3 has a well-developed profile, and the soil features are also represented by carbonate coating and humus clay aggregates. it's interesting that in the lower horizon, there are large infillings of highly carbonated material with iron nodules. Possibly they are associated with the influence of lateral water flow inside the soil. And we correlate it with Luvic Kastanosome. What about second pedocomplex? It differs significantly from pedocomplex 1 in micromorphological structure. It consists of two paleosols separated by a layer of loess. There are two AB horizon with significant sites of biological activity. And needle-shaped calcite is observed in the several horizon. But the second difference is that the underlying horizon contains trace of gypsum that indicates more arid condition during soil formation. And the third difference is the presence of petrocalcic horizon or carbonate crust. And we think the horizon of it's a horizon of strong accumulation of carbonate that have been leached from the soil profile. And maybe the second reason, it's influence of water flow, carbonated water flow in the soil profile. So we correlate this paleosol with Luvic petrocalcic castanosome. And the last one, the second paleosols consists of 4 horizons, and the humus horizon is eroded, but this paleosol is distinguished by a more feral and clay ground mass in the BAT horizon and unusual ferromanganese nodule. You can see it in the middle of slide. We associate the genesis with the activity of iron bacteria. Paleosol has a thick petrocalcic horizon consisting of concretions, and this probably it's the soil of the wettest period. So it was the most humid conditions. We correlate it with the Luvic petrocalcic horizon. Yes, we think so. A short note about the petrocalcic horizon. Pedogenic carbonate formation requires a calcite source, such as concentration by input via dust or precipitation. Major carbonate accumulation occurs mainly in a subhumid to arid regime. It's about less than 750 millimeters. There are several stages of development, and there leads to the formation of a carbonate layer up to 50 centimeters thick. So it can be very big and very thick. At the micro level, it has revealed that this is the lower developed horizon of paleosol and very high degree of mixing. Sometimes properties of hydrogenic genesis we are found. You can see it on the left photo, and we think it's a how to say it's influenced by subsoil flows or saturated by carbonate. So a little bit about another result. The magnetic susceptibility diagram shows that a good correlation between these parameters for the selected layers and MIS. It can be seen that there are differences in the time of accumulation of deposits and in the cold and warm stages. I mean, as can be seen from the diagram, there are deposits have highly silty composition. It's about 90%, and the sand content rarely exceed 5%, which distinguishes these layers from the another regions. increased silt content in the some soil horizon confirm micromorphological data. So as you see, this layer can be formed in MIS 3 stages. So it's not a well-developed soil, but we found some micromorphology and micromorphology features. And this is the results of pedogenic processes. And in the conclusions, we can say that the chemical content in soil and loess is practically the same. Only humus content can be a little bit more in the AB horizon. So thank you for your attention, and I can answer your questions.
Question for Olga. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so my question refers to the first soil, the uppermost soil in the first complex. You presented this soil, named this soil as calci soil, yes? Do you believe this soil, the accumulation of secondary carbonates has developed in this soil already where the soil existed at the land surface, or maybe the saturation with secondary carbonates was younger after burial? So the question is just for the paleopedogenic explanation. Is this, how to say, complex of soils saturated with carbonates, secondary carbonates, from the time where the soils existed as surface soils, or is it, how to say, secondary saturation with secondary carbonates after burial? Yes, this is the question for reconstruction, very important.
Yes, I agree with you, but you know, all paleosols, you can find secondary carbonates in the all paleosols, but this paleosol first of pedocomplex 1 differs by a low content of lithogenic carbonate. I mean, like a calcite crystal in the ground mass. So we think that it's the lower developed soil, like Serozom in Russian classification, if you know.
Okay, but the question was that the first, the how to say, third soil, the castanozem, is quite poor in carbonates, secondary carbonates, yes? The second, so the intermediate is much more enriched. And the uppermost soil, the calci soil, presently classified as calci soil, is also rich in the secondary carbonates. So the question is, did the conditions change and there was much larger accumulation of secondary carbonates during the development of those soils, or maybe it is secondary feature developed after burial? If you don't know answer, okay, because I know it is very, very hard question and not easy to but I wanted just to know your opinion.
You know, only this calci soil has a carbonate crystal in the ground mass. So it means that they are not leached at all from the ground mass. But castanozome has no carbonates in the ground mass, only like near features. So I think it's important for reconstruction, and it means that first paleosoil is the, how to say, less developed, and we believe that we can classify it as calci soil. And the next second, third Paleosol, it's a Castanosem, because carbonate, yes, it's a very big problem about what is the, for example, hypercoating of carbonates. What is this?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Appreciate it. So, can we see,
So I should.
Question as well.
Can I add something to this?
Yes.
Just for this paleogenic carbonate, since I was there also. Yeah, it's a combination of both looks, a lot of features in micromorphology, like needle calcite or just accumulation on the calcite, the porosities there. They can be happening during the time of soil formation, but there are also very larger concretions that is hard to explain. Okay. And especially scattered and distributed in different horizons. There might be another also aspects that very relevant.
Because you know the reason of my question, we know soils which were developed, for example, as canopy soils, so insecty soils, and it means the conditions were specific and moisture climate and maybe not so hot. But as a paleosols now, they are created or changed into calci soils, yes, because of secondary, let's say, saturation with carbonates. And now we describe them as calci soils. But for paleometallurgical reconstruction, better is to know how they existed as surface soils. Yes?
Yeah, it's important to share the diagenic features and
but it is really
features
not easy
contemporary.
to recognize the time of saturation. Yes, okay.
go ahead, Sergey, you had your hand raised. What is your question, comment?
Yes, it's possible.
Yes.
Could you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. First, I must say that I am really happy to hear to this presentation. It means that researchers return to Tajik Lurs Paleosol sequences, which are most detailed archives of Pleistocene climatic fluctuations within the whole Lurs belt of Eurasia. I belong to the previous generation of researchers of Tajik sections, which took place in the 90s. So I have a lot of questions, but maybe I limit myself only to two. Well, even one question and one comment. The question is also in the same line of classification of the paleosols, and what surprised me a lot in this work is classification of all three paleosols. Two paleosols, in fact. The upper is calcisol. That is also surprising, as we heard, but other two are castanosems. Castanosem development is mostly associated with steppe, even dry steppe pedogenesis. Whereas from different sources of information, we know that during the interglacials, climate was quite humid and forest ecosystems dominated in this area, as it is now in the Holocene, before the anthropogenic deforestation. Olga, don't you see certain contradiction between identification of these paleosols as castanosems and other sources of information about forest ecosystems there, also from pollen data, which you showed to us?
You know, the most reconstruction mean that I choose the dry colon section to the correlation of Mazar, and there are several results about. So what I want to say, the Donov et al. maybe I should show you.
Actually,
So can you see? This is the correlation about Abimazar and Darai column. So yes, I know that there are can be some difference between the relief and the type of soils, but calcisol and castanosome usually the same in Abimazar and Darai column. I know that the Donov use a lot of result of palynological data from Pahomov, and yes, there were forest, and as you see, 1 second. So it's usually the broadleaf forest for the second and third paleosol in the pedocomplex 1 and 2nd. So, by the way, it's so difficult to classify the paleosol because there is a lot of process after burying, and it was very big discussions. What is the soil? Castanosome, calcisome, phyzome, maybe even, but
who knows?
Yes, really, who knows?
Well, Olga, I must say that exactly in Darai column, I was in charge for micromorphology in the research of Dodonov. And these soils have very well developed leached B horizon of cambic type, and they don't have well developed molic A horizon necessary for castanosem. So in Darai column, I would say they are not castanosems, they are forest cambisols. And I think that in this sense, this comment about that cambisols could be misinterpreted for calcisols or castanosems because of secondary carbonates, which arrived later, is quite true. So my comment now, after the question, is be very careful, please, with the diagenetic features, post-burial carbonatization, and also gypsum. Gypsum could also arrive later and not be pedogenetic, which you determined in the lower pedocomplexes. I think we have a very good tool to discriminate between diagenetic and pedogenetic features. Diagenetic features cross soil horizon boundaries. They are above Paleosol, in the Paleosol, below Paleosol, and in this way, at the first approach, we could partly discriminate them. And then I would recommend you to date these carbonate neoformations in your Paleosol with radiocarbon method. Our colleagues did it in the European Earth sequences, and frequently in the Pleistocene Paleosols, they got Holocene radiocarbon dates of secondary carbonates. Means carbonates arrived to Paleosols later. Thank you very much. That's all. I took too much time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Thank you. And the round table on Monday, this would be good to keep this conversation going.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. But Dr. Talebi is next.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Please share your screen and proceed with your presentation.
Can you see?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Can I start?
Yes.
This study is a part of my PhD thesis of Gorgon of Agricultural Sciences and natural resources of Iran, and a part of timing and ecology of the human occupation of Central Asia project. And I would like to thank this project and the university for support. And I would like to present paleoenvironmental reconstruction of the Pleistocene Los Paleosols in the southern Tajikistan, Honako 2 section. Lost deposits and paleosol development provide an excellent archive for understanding past climate and environmental changes. The southern Tajikistan is an area highly sensitive to Pleistocene climate changes, which can reach thicknesses of 200 meters, is a key region for reconstructing past climate in Central Asia. Loss studies generally indicate a close relationship between a strongest deposition of loss in cold, dry condition and a tendency toward soil formation in warm and cold, dry conditions, and in warm and more humid periods. The dust deposits in the southern Tajikistan were transported by the regional westerly wind, and also source material in this area originate from the Tian Shan and Pamir mountains. Recently, accurate studies from the lost deposits of Tajikistan are documented, but micromorphological investigation at Honako 2 section in the southern Tajikistan have not been carried out for understanding pedogenic processes and their relationship for paleoenvironmental reconstruction. The aims of this study are to reconstruct the paleoclimate, to identify of paleosols and modern soils in lost section, and evaluation of their evolution and weathering, and also to probe the pedological changes using physico-chemical properties and micromorphological investigation. Physico-chemical properties, for example, soil organic content and calcium carbonate equivalent, are very sensitive to environment and climate changes. And also, micromorphological investigation shows pedogenic feature and accurate information of the degree of soil development by micromorphological index of soil development or MISECA index. These tools can be useful for climate interpretation. Tajikistan is a mountainous country which is surrounded by mountains to the northeast and the deserts of Central Asia to the west. The climate of Tajikistan is subtropical and semi-arid with drastic changes according to elevation. The Honako 2 section is located near Khovaling village in the southern Tajikistan. At present, the mean annual temperature and precipitation at Honako 2 section are about 9 to 11 centigrade and 500 to 845 millimeter respectively. Soil moisture and soil temperature regimes are xeric and mesic respectively. And vegetations in this area are shrubland and rangeland. From each horizon of the Honako 2 section in October 2021, a representative undisturbed samples for micromorphological analysis and additional bulk samples were taken for laboratory analysis. And then for the study of micromorphology, the most evolution horizons, sea horizon, calcic and petrocalcic horizons were selected. After drying and crushing the samples and sewing a 2 mm mesh, the soil physicochemical properties were investigated. Organic carbon was determined by wet oxidation with chromic acid and back titration with ferrous ammonium sulfate. Soil pH was measured in 1:2 soil water suspension using a digital conductivity meter. Equivalent calcium carbonate was measured using a titration method in the soil science laboratory of Gorgon of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources of Iran. For micromorphological analysis, undisturbed samples were hardened by resin, and the hardened blocks were cut into thin planes. Micromorphological description were done in plane and cross-polarized light using a polarizing microscope and the definition based on Bullock and Stokes. The whole Fonokoto section is 120 meters thick, which contains 12 loess units and 16 pedocomplexes. The uppermost is the modern soil, or soil Holocene. That is a typical haploxerox according to the soil survey manual. Modern soil and 4 representative pedocomplexes and 4 loess units have been represented to a study of paleoenvironment and past pedogenic processes. These pedocomplexes are covered by about 5,800 centimeter loess sediment divided by different types of interglacial paleosols. The modern soil with Oak Creek and weakly developed cambic horizons show angular to subangular blocky structure and did not effervesce with 10% hydrochloric acid due to the absence of a condition favorable for the downward decalcification and the subsequent clay illuviation, and also formation of argillic horizons were not observed. Pedocomplex 1 consists of BK, BTK, ABK horizons, and that some horizons are shown here. Loess units are enriched by mycelium of calcite. Pedocomplex 2 includes the ABK, BTK, ABTK, and also BKG with more iron and manganese nodules than pedocomplex 1. Pedocomplex 3 is formed by a strongly developed dark reddish brown BT horizons with shiny surface and high calcite depletion. Pedocomplex 4 consists of ABK, BTK, BK, and BC horizons. As shown, the soil pH varies from 7.7 to 8.1. The lowest pH is observed in the modern soil. The average organic carbon content is 1% and ranges from 0.5% to 3.1%, and showing an increasing trend with available soil moisture. Leaching of carbonate from upper horizon is observed in most of the studied section and is highly intensive in increasing in precipitation. Increasing calcium carbonate equivalent with depth in the modern soil in this study and a study in the northern Iran and also in the southern Tajikistan illustrates common trend in humid climates. The highest calcium carbonate equivalent occurred in CK horizons of pedocomplex 3 that can be attributed to accumulation of carbon leached from loess unit 3. Large accumulation of carbonates in loess units of northern Iran are reported. The micromorphological observation show in the modern soil the presence of numerous experimental pedofeatures with loose infilling along the voids, loose infilling of channel suggests an important biological activity, and also plant remains and dark gray color humus are present. Likewise, a recent study in the northern Iran reveals that soil formation and favorable condition during the Holocene. Various types of calcitic pedofeatures are recognized in the loess units, consisting of calcite coating, hypocoating, infilling, and calcite nodule. The presence of calcite coating and infilling along the walls can be attributed to later recalcification processes. Carbonate nodules in pedocomplex 1 is larger than loess units. The large size of secondary carbonates indicates more stable periods in pedocomplex 1 compared to the loess units and modern soil. Iron and manganese coating are present in these loess units, suggesting wet conditions. The dominant prefabric in pedocomplex 1 is calcite crystallitic, which shows a higher amount of calcium carbonate, and also the absence or lower occurrence of clay coating in some argillic horizon result from their physical disturbance by swelling and shrinking in soil. In the pedocomplex 2, needle-shaped calcite was recognized more than pedocomplex 1, which can be attributed to the presence of organic matter and sufficient humidity during the formation of these soils. Calcite depletion zones can be identified as areas of speckled bifabric in micromass dominated by a crystallitic bifabric. This pedofeature was more observed in pedocomplex 3 compared to other pedocomplexes, which indicate the formation of this pedocomplex in a humid climate. Killer pedofeatures were identified as clay coating, which show abundant calcite depletion pedofeature and some evidence of secondary carbonate. Therefore, the best developed and preserved clay coating are seen in pedocomplex 4 and especially in pedocomplex 3. They are the result of the higher soil moisture, lower shrink and soil properties, and their better preservation. The other noticeable characteristic pedofeature is iron manganese hydroxide nodule. Their presence demonstrates that all of these soils have been periodically saturated. These pedofeatures in pedocomplex 3 ranged from 10 to 50%, which is considerably higher than other pedocomplexes. Totally, according to micromorphological observation, the presence of developed clay coating, iron and manganese hydroxide and calcite depletion pedofeature in paleosols indicate the formation of these soils in quaternary or interglacial periods. Micromorphological investigation in the southern Tajikistan showed that well-developed paleosol in comparison with loess units are characterized by increased clay coating, accumulation of secondary carbonate, iron, and manganese pedofeatures. All these features indicate soil forming processes under moist and warm climatic conditions. In the micromorphological index of soil evolution, several micromorphological features, for example, microstructure, bifabric, the presence of clay coating, the calcified zone, iron and manganese oxides, and degree of mineralized grains were used to explain the degree of soil developed. These index values ranged from 0 to 24, with increasing degree of soil developed according to their calculated MISECA values. Modern soil is somewhat weakly developed, while paleosols of the underlying pedocomplexes were formed in a more humid climate. In the northern Iran, a comparison of the degree of soil development of the modern soil and paleosol using MISECA index indicate that paleosol have the highest degree of development. In this study, the modern soil and pedocomplex 1 and pedocomplex 2 and also pedocomplex 4 are moderately developed, but pedocomplex 3 is well developed and showing the best developed and preserved clay coating, and also the calcified zone about 70%. Loess deposit and paleosol development in the southern Tajikistan, which can reach thicknesses of 200 meters, provide an important archive for environmental changes in Central Asia. Micromorphological features of paleosol, such as clay coating, calcite depletion zone, secondary carbonates reflect the formation of these soils in more stable and humid periods. Micromorphological observation and physicochemical properties of CONACO2 section revealed the paleoenvironmental conditions during loess accumulation and soil formation. The soil pH and the calcium carbonate content show a decreasing trend due to increasing in precipitation and available soil moisture during the formation of paleosol. The best developed and preserved clay coating are seen in pedocomplex 3 because of the higher soil moisture and lower shearing soil properties. Thank you for your attention.
We have our next speaker, and the reason I'm asking is if we do not, that would allow plenty of time for questions. But if we do, we need to hold the questions, so we'll stay on schedule. Yeah.
There is no next speaker. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we do.
He's here. Yes, we have.
I'm very sorry, but in order to stay on schedule, we won't be having any questions, but save your questions. Maria, you can basically take them directly to the speaker and
yeah.
Okay. All right. So, all right. Okay, well, let's move on to the next speaker as Ferdinand.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much to give me this opportunity to present the preliminary result of my PhD work. So, I'm Ferdinand Eboel. I'm a PhD student at the Botswana International University of Science and Technology. This study is, as we all know, paleosol are good memories of past climate and environmental condition. Moreover, when they contain pedogenic carbon, they also represent a window into study of atmospheric carbon sequestration. In Botswana, concrete are very well spread in Botswana landscape and soils. In the central district of Botswana. So the research question of this work is, what are the processes beyond the formation of this paleosol? Can the carbonate feature in this paleosol be used to construct past environmental and climatic conditions of the region? Where does the calcium require for the accumulation of carbonate component?
Ferdinand, excuse me, can you put your PowerPoint in presentation mode, please?
I think you might have left it. Sounded like he had a bad connection. It might have dropped him out of the meeting.
Oh.
All you had to do was click on the little icon at the bottom.
Yeah.
What is happening? Это девочка, которая была мама. Мальчик. А вот 12 человек. Было 15, сейчас 13. А, вот 12.
Want to do Peter Jacobs? Do you want to do Peter Jacobs?
Yeah, we want to do Peter, but we want to stay pretty much on schedule. We don't want somebody to tune in and go, Peter's already given this presentation. So we need to wait until 20 after.
Yeah, can I ask something
Of
to
course.
the previous presentation?
Yeah,
Yes.
probably we have a question to the previous one. Have a chance.
But is she here, there?
Yeah,
Here,
yeah.
here. Talebi? Are you here? Are you there? Yes. Can you hear me? Maybe she is.
She was gone to the back.
She's gone, yes.
Probably escaped our questions.
Okay.
Maybe I can.
Yeah, probably, yes, we can.
Ah, okay. Yes, I would like to know how to you calculate the
Yes,
morphology
the same question.
indexes
Okay.
and to decide that the soil is well or not divided.
Yeah, actually, it happened during my PhD with late Professor Stokes. And he gave me an article from McDowell and Vladimir and asked me how we can develop or modify this index with a more arid and semi-good soil. So I published it in 2003 and with all the information. And I usually use that. It's really much helpful because in some cases we need to quantify the change in order to correlate it with another soil forming factors. So if you are interested, I can show you.
And let me please.
Yeah.
I'm also.
Sure. And I would like to-
Ferdinand is back.
Yeah,
Ah, okay, thank you.
but Ferdinand is back now.
Yes, yeah. Ferdinand.
Yeah, sorry, the connection. I lost the connection.
Yes.
Yeah, but please continue.
Okay.
Can you put it in the presentation?
Thank you. So the studies that yes, okay. The study is taking place in Botswana at the Botswana Central District, and we identify a paleosoil, many paleosoil section along a this this river called Michi. The geomorphological unit of the sector is called Eastern Havel, which is cover the east central areas of Botswana. Botswana distinguished by gently slopy plain that protect Precambrian mountain and hills. Geological formation of this region belong to the Lebon date, late Triassic to early Jurassic, and those geological formations are covered with Kalahari sand group constituted by Cenozoic to recent Eolian deposit. Typical vegetation are bush sour. As I was saying previously, we identify mini soil section in that area, containing carbonate failure. For this preliminary work, I will just for this preliminary present.
I think it's gone again.
Botswana is far away.
Perfect in time. The only thing to do is to move on here to talk up to.
Yes. Okay, okay.
And hopefully I don't cut out.
Yeah, we hope so.
It's funny, I talk for a living, mostly in front of 18 to 20-year-olds, but when I stand up in front of professionals, I'm always a little bit nervous. So that's why I might cut out. Okay, blow that up. Can everybody hear me online? And let's make sure when we get started that the slides are advanced as well. So I'm Peter Jacobs. I've been with this group for a long time. I met Curtis at least 30 years ago at a paleopedology symposium, and I've known a lot of you or met you along the way. I've been to Russia and Mexico many times. And a geological and water survey. Henry, by he's a research geologist, he's a glacial geologist, and Jose Luis is a geochronologist and also does geological mapping as well. He's the OSL guy, and that's really the basis of this talk. So don't corner me on too many details on some of the things I'm going to show you here. He didn't make it to this meeting. Anyway, what we want to talk about is the last interglacial Sangamon geosol. And the first thing I want to do as part of this talk is I want to review just the overall, some of the morphology, where it occurs and so forth. Things you've probably heard before, but it's worth mentioning again. This box shows North America, and it's the area where we recognize the Sangamon geosol, Sangamon paleosol, whatever you want to call it, as the last interglacial soil stratigraphic unit. It extends maybe a little bit beyond the box, but this is the core area, including its type section. There we go. Here's a map showing quaternary landscapes in the central part of the country of the United States. Notice there's four different colors on here. The lightest blue is MIS2 glacial landscape. And for the most part, the Sangamon geosol is not found anywhere near the surface in that landscape. In many instances, it was eroded away by the ice. The further south you get, especially south of the Great Lakes and in the southern parts of Iowa, It does occur occasionally, but it's often deeply buried, and it's hard to access it. Areas in lighter blue, which is going to be the focus more of this study, this is our actual study area that I'll be showing you data from. This is the MIS-6 glacial landscape. And the Sangamon geosol developed into those glaciogenic deposits and is buried by loess by MIS-3 and especially MIS-2 loess that mantles the entire landscape. If we go to the darker blue areas out here, these are older pre-MI6 glacial events. The Sangamon geosol occurs there, but most typically it's welded in or has merged with other older paleosols. It can occur in thick loess deposits, but those are typically limited to along some of the major river valleys. And then when we get out in some of these white areas, especially in places like Nebraska and Kansas, the Sangamon geosol occurs in thick loess deposits. What we're going to focus on, though, are areas in the MIS-6 glacial sediments. One of the goals of this project is to try and actually pin down and date these glacial deposits. Are they indeed MIS-6? Because for the longest time, we've assumed they are. In fact, the Sangamon geosol was used as some of the original basis for this quaternary stratigraphy in this part of the world. A little bit of review. The Sangamon geosol represents a time transgressive land surface. And if you need me to define geosol, it's what's used in the North American stratigraphic code as the official soil stratigraphic unit, and it has some criteria that need to be met in order to recognize something as a geosol. One is that we can map it, it has widespread distribution, and is buried, for instance. What we see is that the Sangamon geosol developed in MIS-6 deposits, transformed those deposits into soils throughout MIS-5 and 4. If it's buried beneath thicker MIS-3 loess or other sediments, we'll actually classify that as a Sangamon geosol. But in many areas, including where this study is focusing, big broad areas of that sort of intermediate blue color here, then MIS-3 loess accumulated on the top. And literally there was an aggregation of the topsoil that in thicker areas we separate out as the Farmdale geosol that developed throughout and at the end of MIS-3, and we call that the Farmdale Sangamon geosol complex. And so technically what I'm going to be focusing on in here, even though I'll say Sangamon mostly, just as a colloquial thing, it's the Farmdale Sangamon geosol complex. How long did it form? We don't really have a lot of good age control all over the place. There are a few TL, OSL, and cosmogenic isotope studies that pin down that indeed this is the last interglacial forming in deposits that accumulated during MIS-6. The base in particular is less well dated than what is buried on the top. Are the slides changing online for folks? I don't want Sergey to miss any of these things. Yeah. Okay, here's a photograph. It's cut off on the bottom. Brandon Curry, who's a colleague of mine, provided. This is actually the type section of the Sangamon geosol in central Illinois. It's in a limestone quarry, so this is all overburdened, they mine away. This is what says Vandalia, member of the Glassford Formation. Those are Illinois and or MIS-6 glacial deposits, and the Sangamon geosol is developed into that. In this instance right here, you can see Farmdale geosol title up there. This is all the MIS-3 loess that are graded on the landscape. Here they're separated. There's a Sangamon and a Farmdale geosol. I'll show you another picture in a minute. Then above this is the Peoria loess, which is MIS-2. Basal Peoria loess in the Sangamon type area is very organic rich, the upper part not so. Okay, what sort of morphology do we see with the Sangamon geosol? Mostly, it's a texture contrast soil. Has an eluvial upper horizon. We find A horizons in places, E horizons, and then there's a very thick and pronounced alluvial B horizon underneath. And I'll show you some data from this study. The texture contrast is especially enhanced in some of these places like this study area I'll be focusing on, because the A horizon got over thickened, we say, because of aggregation of a few centimeters of this MIS-3 loss. In some cases, the MIS-3 loss may be absent and the MIS-2 loss is thin. In those cases, things all meld together into one polygenetic paleosol, but you can usually fairly easily pick out the MIS2 loss upper horizons, but they become part of the modern DT as well. I'm not going to be focusing on those. There are some examples when you go to the type area and other places, the texture contrast is lost in some soils. Those till plains are very flat, except there were subtle depressions that filled in with clay-rich material that was washed across the landscape throughout MIS 5 and 4. Those are referred to as accretion glades because they're all very poorly drained, and they do not have any distinct texture contrast horizonation. We'll not be focusing on those in this talk. Okay, couple of pictures. So here's a nice Sangamon geosol profile developed in the till. So MIS 6 till. You can see some of the horizonation. For a little darker, I think you can see the A and E horizon of the Sangamon have faded out. Much of the carbon is actually degraded. So it ends on taking on the appearance of an E horizon for much of the entire soil profile. And then this silty material up above there is the Farmdale geosol. They're all sort of stuck together. This one's a little bit thicker than what we're going to see in our study area. And there's Professor Conan for scale. When you look at a close-up of the BTs of many of these things, they have bright red colors, nice oxidized colors, upland settings, thick clay coatings. If you can allow it to dry out on the core or an exposure, it'll be a really well-developed structure as well. But I think you can see some of the alluvial features in there. And Kursk, I showed you, I think, thin sections of some of these soils like this, really thick alluvial clay coatings. Here's another one. This is over in the type area, just to again illustrate some of the difference in morphology. It's a poorly drained, still a texture contrast profile, but we've got the separated profiles. This is the Sangamon geosol from here down, developed into MIS 6 deposits. This is all MIS 3 loss that has the separated Farmdale geosol on top. But again, where that MIS 3 loss thins down, it becomes part of the A horizon of the Sangamon. And then just one last example. This is where we see the thinner, only MIS 2 loss sitting on top of it, and these soils become polygenetic. So there's different horizons formed in MIS 2 loss, but this is still the BT of the modern soil. It's just been sitting there and is joined in with it. And the term soil welding, I don't see people use that as much anymore, but that was coined based on these examples with thin MIS 2 loss over the Sangamon. So in this study, my colleagues and I, we set out to collect profiles of the Sangamon geosol so we could begin to develop a chronology of the Illinois or MIS 6 glacial deposits. Originally, some of the first results were coming in. We thought we might be able to get a chrono sequence of MIS 6 deposits, and that may still materialize, but we're not there yet, as I'll explain in just a few minutes here. So we collected samples at outcrops. Mostly, though, we used a hydraulic soil coring rig. I'll show you a picture in a minute here. The detailed morphological description, the sampling, so we can study features, particle size analysis, geochemistry, and I focus on the 8 to 63 micrometer fraction. I use that for provenance, but it actually fits in for long-term interglacial scale weathering as well. We've removed the finest fractions that are moving around by alluviation in the profile. We did the mineralogy of the silt and also less than 2 micrometer clay, and some dithionic extractable as well. The OSL, mostly we're doing OSL on quartz, but a few of the profiles are being really weird, and Jose Luis is using infrared stimulated luminescence on some feldspars, and he's getting results that he likes. And there's some of the other details on that. Okay, so this is the location, South Central Indiana. I showed you, maybe I need a better map. I just suddenly realized this is south of the Great Lakes. This boundary right here, the red line, is the limit of glaciation. And so we're focusing near the limit where there's a fair amount of glaciogenic sand deposition, because we're trying to apply the OSL technique to sands. That hopefully would have been reset the OSL signal when the sands were being deposited. Almost without exception, they're outwash deposits, and this is where some of the problems come up. But we do have one sand dune down here. And it's a nice sand dune with a beautiful sanguine soil. We may collect more of those. I threw a couple of till profiles in as well. We have others, but these are ones that we have collected specifically for this project, and any of the data that I'm showing you here when I talk about morphology is based on these profiles. One off the map, there's a radiocarbon site that would be important as well. It's just up off the map right here, but we'll see what that profile looks like. Okay, here's an outcrop, one of our sites. You can see the bright red colors of the sanguine. You can see the solum extends down to beyond 4.5 meters beneath the surface. Peoria loss, not really thick here, but over 1 meter of it. Carrying the soil. There's a little bit of the abraded rock sand silt that forms the A horizon on this bright red BT horizon. We have OSL samples collected in the C horizon outwash down below. We'll see those results. Most of the samples, though, were collected with the Giddings hydraulic soil coring rig. And this works well for collecting the paleosols. I'll get to this in just a couple of minutes. Here's Peoria loss. So this is the top, and this is 2 feet, 4 feet. So here we're seeing the sanguine BT showing up. Yeah. And we would be sampling for OSL down here several meters beneath the surface. Once we got out of, especially BC horizon, we're into horizons we would describe as being a C. We collected lots of samples. We haven't run them all for reasons I'll tell you in just a minute. So all this came about because at the IGWS, they have an OSL lab. In fact, it's growing. They've got one reader. They've had one reader for a few years. They've got another one that'll come online in January or so, which maybe will help this project just a little bit. So they've got some money to run these samples, although a lot of them are sort of run on the side because there's other more pressing projects they do this year. So Jose Luis likes this, and I wrote that we have successful results, but we've also got a bunch of problems. And some of the problems result from some of these things right here. Some I can explain a little bit better than others. And I'll show you these results. Samples are often collected from cores, and in many instances, it's the only way you're going to get a sample. And some of our dates are really good, but some of them are just wildly inaccurate. They're not going to fit. Maybe it's from contamination, but maybe it has to do with things like we don't understand the environment that the sand is accumulating in, the signal wasn't reset. He says the quartz is often saturated, and there's a lot of the grains that just are not suitable for pulling out the age. So it takes a lot of runs in order to compensate for this partial bleaching. And along with that, the run times and the readers are very long. So one sample, it'll tie up the reader for at least a week just to get a few outlet plots. And so then this becomes a problem when they have more pressing projects that have actual funding behind them. Things like that. So we're working on it though. And I don't understand all the unstable signals, but you can tease that out of the data. Just one picture, there's Henry bending over. So we're down. This is probably the same in there. And out of the bottoms of these tubes, we collect the sand. And in many instances, it's working out well. And we're also doing it from really deep drillings, down tens of meters beneath the surface when there's really thick fills. Here are some of the results. Anyone in black is something that is looking okay. The ones in red are just some of the funky ones, either the partial bleaching, the port signal's unstable, and it's hard to say what's going on, or at least hard for me to say. These are the examples from one of our, this is a really big paleosol and outwash. Geomorphically, it should be Illinois or MIS6. They're a little bit older, but these are the ones from Feldspar. That's what the got is there. One of the reasons we're confident is we also have a beryllium tin profile at one of the paleosols, and it's fit. They look like they're matching up fairly well, supporting the idea that these OSL runs are indeed giving us reasonable ages for the timing of the deposition of the sand. This is back to the original slide that the paleosols that I showed you, and these are some of the paleosols we have with ages directly on sea horizon sand beneath them. I should back up just a second here. Some of these, like for instance, the Smith site, there's no paleosols here with that. Geomorphically, we've got this Illinois and H sands, so we're trying to accumulate dates. And the whole idea originally is it looked like some of the oldest ones were going to be further south and one was towards the north. And we wanted to compare the Paleosol morphology over maybe like a 20 or 30,000 year time span of deposition. The error bars are too big right now. We don't have enough numbers, but maybe at a future paleopedology conference, we'll focus on that. Okay, I don't need to do too much of this. So here's the outcrop we saw before, just as an example, and these are the ages that are coming back with these. And the distribution can be fairly wide. But Jose Luis hones in on some of these and he can pick out the aliquots that seem to make the most sense. And we should get him online if anybody wants to question some of these, but this at least provides a good photograph. Here's another big outcrop. So this is all sand that's piled up, the same geosols at the top, and a couple of the ages that are coming out from these. And he says that they're doing, that they're reliable. So the base, just as a bit of review, the base of the Sangamon geosol, they'll have this on the conclusion slide, is coming in averaging around 160 Ka, which is going to fit into MIS 6, at least when the ice was pushing to its furthest extent in the south. What about burial chronology? In these areas where there's a thin layer of this MIS 3 loss on top, it's never been possible to date it. There's just too much potential for contamination, and we don't know exactly what was accumulating. Here we've got a proximal loss site that's immediately adjacent to the Wabash River, which is on the far western boundary of the state, and that was a potential source of dust out of the river. This is Peoria loss and some of the chronology with that, but it's this Roxana silt lithologic unit is the one that are graded on top during MIS 3. And we have radiocarbon ages from charcoal in there that's showing that, at least in this part of the world, it's a little bit older, closer to the Mississippi River, but in this part of the world, it graded between about 38,000 and 30,000 years before present. So this is on 1.5 meters of Roxana silt, but we've got 20 centimeters, 50 to 80 kilometers away. We can't date it 50 to 80 kilometers away, but we can transfer this over there. And then we can follow some of the geochemical signals and mineralogy of the Roxana silt to match that up and be confident that we've got the Sangamon geosol forming from about 160 up to around 30,000. Okay, switching gears, so that's the chronology. What I want to do is show you some of the morphology and the weathering trends out of these soils. So I'll show you data graphs on the next few slides, one for each one of these points. Colors are typically 5YR. You probably saw that in photos I showed you. All these profiles are leached in carbonates. So we don't need to talk about or argue about any diagenetic carbonate accumulation in these. It is a very humid climate. Water moves through these profiles and probably has been since those sands were deposited at the margin of the ocean. They're leached anywhere from a minimum, it depends on how deep we could sample on some of these. We find calcareous deposits, but typically, if we've got a good position, geomorphic position to sample the Sangamon soil and sand, it's going to be leached to great depth. And our sampling extends for a minimum of 440 centimeters all the way up to 14.6 meters beneath the surface and leached to carbonate the whole way. The till profiles, at least just the two I had there, are reached about 5 meters depth. The till's denser, and it's not nearly as much. The soil are thick, they're mostly comprised of BT horizons. Clay gains relative to sea horizons, these are in the sands, averaging about 23% pickup in clay from the sand, and turning it into clay loams and so forth. Potassium feldspars hardly depleted, but the pelagian clay loss is significant. And the single greatest measure of weathering in these soils, that at least is predictable, and we can see it in profile after profile, are changes in the clay mineralogy. We lock up. Yeah, okay. So I just decided that when I was putting the data together, I got a bunch of XY scatter plots and things and a lot of shotgun blasts on the screen, which is going to be the upshot at the end of some of this. Outwash profiles, they're great to try and apply OSL to, but for studying systematic trends in profile development and weathering and so forth, stratification of the outwash confounds some things, confuses them. So Solon thickness, box and whisker plots, that's essentially the extent of the data. The median value is the line across there, and especially the average for mean values, right? So the mean value for Solon thickness is about 4.5 meters. And most of that, you can see about 3.5 meters of it is BT horizon. So these are sands that have distinct clay films on ped faces or distinct clay bridges across sand grains. That difference in the meter is partly the upper Solon and also BC horizons underneath that have reddened, but we don't see any significant or not a lot of significant clay accumulation. If we just look at clay gains, which is the difference of C horizon, or BT horizon minus C horizon, they're going to be averaging about 23%. I have that number in this one. And in terms of how much clay is in there, averages in the horizon that I call the BT max, that has the most clay. It's at about 27%, which is not an insignificant clay gain. Colors, the BT horizon, most of these are going to have a hue of 5YR time and time again. The BT is like 5YR 4/4. The till profiles, the till's denser, they're always just a little bit more yellow. And we did have one profile with some really, really bright red colors, 2.5YR. Looking at diionite extractable iron, it's averaging about 2% in those BT horizons in terms of BT minus C difference, although the range can be fairly extensive, almost up to 6%. Looking at some of the mineralogy, this is looking at plagioclase normalized to quartz in the BT horizon. These are the BT max, I should say, minus what it is in the C horizon. And for the most part, we see that there's loss of plagioclase out of these, but because of, I'm going to argue, sediment stratification or finding upward sequences in some of these outwash deposits. Actually, when you just do this simple BT minus C, suddenly there's a gain in plagioclase. You're like, I don't buy this. Potassium feldspars, on the other hand, though, you see those are closer to that gain and loss line, and I don't think there's a tremendous loss in potassium feldspars, and we know that plagioclase is more weatherable than potassium feldspars. And this is just looking at the BT minus C loss here, and you can get a sense that there's a lot more plag that's been lost, and that's what presumably has supplied materials to generate the clays. That, along with transformation of clay minerals themselves. Okay, let's talk about clay mineralogy. We'll wrap this up. Am I running out of time?
Yeah, you need to wrap it up.
Okay, I'll wrap it up really quick here. Anyway, there's significant amounts of illite that have been lost, and there have been gains in kaolinite, and we have the time spans here in order for kaolinite genesis to occur. I'll flip through these really quick. This is what the Illinoisan glaciogenic sediments look like. They're dominated by chlorite and illite and kaolinite in the clay fraction. And what we see happening is that the illite is depleted, chlorite is transformed into vermiculite or other expandable minerals, and the kaolinite increases. This is a Paleosol BT, so we end up with all this interstratified stuff up in the expandables range. Some of it's vermiculite, some of it is smectite. And in particular, we see almost without exception in every Sangamon BT horizon, the shoulder that is interstratified. I don't know how regular, I'm not that much of a mineralogist, interstratified kaolinite expandables. And then when we look at that graded A horizon across the Midwest, vermiculite is added as a component of that. You can measure it from Wisconsin down the Mississippi Valley, and it shows up in that peak. And some of it is clearly interstratified. It shows up there. I'm not showing you the potassium saturations and heatings, but we've done that to show that it's in there. In 1985, there was a paper that John Boardman published, and maybe this will feed into some of our discussions tomorrow. Maybe most people have forgotten about it, but Boardman described this conundrum that the Sangamon, because he'd spent a sabbatical, I think, in the Midwest, was really well developed and comparing it to the Eemian Paleosol in Europe. And he was just laying out at the time, we don't know if it's climate or time. We can't solve that yet, but I think we're getting a little bit closer. There's now data on pollen, ostracods, stalagmite, isotope records out of the mid-continent that we understand a little bit better about the climate. And there were periods of warmer, wetter climate, not just 5E, but even in stage 4. So maybe it's something like climate. But given that many of these soil development processes are time dependent, when we see this chronology that's developing out of here, we know we've got a minimum of 100,000 years, probably 130 or more, and maybe time really is a big driver in this. Maybe that's the camp I'm ending up in. You can sway me one way or the other with some good data, probably. And here are the conclusions. And I guess the single biggest thing to get out of this is, it looks like on average, we're still running samples, but we're going to see the ice getting in there, depositing sand about 160,000 years ago. Burial was silt from around 38 to 30,000 years, and then we went into the cold of MIS2 and burial of that Paleosol. And I think that's it.
See if there are any questions online, because we can continue that conversation for lunch.
Yeah. Sedov will have something for me, probably, right? Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Hey, Sergey, fire away.
Thank you very much, Curtis. I tried to avoid questioning, but the results are so impressive that at least one question I would permit myself. First, Peter, great to see you.
Yes.
Now, my question is, immediately the brain starts to compare your Sangamon isotope stage 5 soil with other synchronous soils in more or less the same latitudinal position in other continents. There are a lot of MIS5 pedocomplexes in Europe, Central Europe, East Europe, and all of them show contrasting differences of phases of soil development within pedocomplex. Even within MIS5, already late substages are clearly distinguished from the early MIS5E stage. And isotope stage 4 really doesn't leave pedogenic evidences in many cases. It is strong cryogenesis and sedimentation. Early Wisconsin glaciation was quite severe, and you tell us that your Paleosol includes not only MIS5 but also MIS4. Did all these changes leave at least some features in your profile? Because weathering is great, but it is not that sensitive. Maybe it all took place in the warmer stages, and what about the colder? Some morphological features or some other analytical results which show polygenesis during this very long and very contrasting period.
You need to show me how to find those signatures. Because for the most part, the morphology and the weathering features, and I hear what you're saying, indicate progressive pedogenesis that was continuous since the end of MIS6 until that dust sedimentation in MIS3 around 38 to 40,000 years before present. And
continuous, but uniform.
Let me, one more thought. There has not been that much micromorphology work done. I did some, but for the most part, it just showed progressive leaching and mineral alteration and thickening, deepening of the solum throughout that time. So you need to show me what some of those fine details would be. Which means you need to come visit.
I lack American visa
Soon, Sergey, soon. In a year.
Thank you, Sergey. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, well, let's move on to our last speaker before our lunch. And so, Tony, you please carry on the thinking about Midwestern Paleosol climate relationships.
I can hear some bellies rumbling, so we'll try to get through this expedient fashion. Perfect. Okay. So this is a great follow-on talk from Peter's here. So we're going to be talking about pedogenesis, particularly in alluvial deposits and stream valleys of the central Great Plains. So for background, let's talk about marine isotope stage 3. There are different ages proposed. We're going to go with the one with the latest benthic stack, so 59 to 27,000 years ago. Most recent interstadial within that last glacial period. Now, in North America in particular, most research has looked at sort of reconstructing the evolution of the ice sheets. So this dashed line here is where the Laurentide ice sheet was during the LGM, and this is sort of the extent at the end of MIS3. That's based on all these dots represent some kind of chronology, either radiocarbon, OSL, etc. This work from Dalton interestingly shows they have some ages like way in here where the interior of the ice sheet should have been, which kind of suggests maybe there was rapid retreats at some point during MIS3. Now, that's important, as we'll get to later on in this talk, is because when the ice sheet is retreating, where is that meltwater going to? And there's a lot of debate whether it goes up into the Arctic Ocean, the North Atlantic, or if we zoom into this area, right here, there's evidence for glacial advances. This would be the Des Moines lobe down into the headwaters of what is the Missouri and the Mississippi river systems. So retreat of this then results in meltwater coming down into the Gulf of Mexico. That has atmospheric circulation implications, which we will discuss shortly. It also provides a mechanism for the deposition of glaciogenic loess. So this would be the rock sand silt that Peter was just talking about. That's in the Mississippi and Missouri river valleys. In the central Great Plains, that same loess unit is called the Gilman Canyon Formation. Talk about that shortly too. But for this talk, I guess the overarching question that we want to look at is, what are paleoenvironmental conditions away from the ice sheet? So to do that, we're going to focus on the central Great Plains. This is not the MIS3 ice sheet. This is just a cool image that I found. So just want to point that out. So very briefly, sort of modern climatic conditions, there's a really strong climatic gradient across the central Great Plains. It goes from, in terms of precipitation, you've got about 400 millimeters per year out in the west, to around about 1,000 east central Great Plains, and temperatures about 10 degrees down to 16 degrees Celsius from north to south. So here's central Great Plains, and we're going to focus on bunch of localities where MIS3 age sediments and paleosols have been identified, preserved in stream valleys. I'm going to hopefully sort of contrast what we find out in the west to what we find in the east. So let me begin by talking about the Severance Formation. So back in 2000, Rolf led my colleague and co-author on this, led a Friends of the Pleistocene field trip. And this was up here in northeastern Kansas. And he presented these MIS3 aged sediments and soils as alluvial and colluvial facies of the Gilman Canyon Formation. So at that time, the Gilman Canyon Formation was an established lithostratigraphic unit, developed in Luss. So Rolf made these facies distinctions, but what was suggested on that field trip is, well, because the lithology is different, why don't you just come up with another lithostratigraphic unit? And so Rolf did, known as the Severance Formation. Since that time, Severance Formation, basically all of these dots here represent Severance Formation sediments and soils that have been found in intervening years. And of importance is that the Paleosols developed in the Severance Formation all have very similar morphological characteristics. So as you're about to see, they all have well-developed BT horizons, they all have prominent clay films, they all have prismatic structure, they all have sort of brown to reddish hues, a lot of consistency there, and they have consistent ages. That's not quite the case as you move west. There are slightly different weathering histories, and we'll sort of look at that here in a second. Okay, so we're going to start up here in northeastern Kansas on the Wolf River. This is where Rolf established the type section for the Severance Formation. If we look at stratigraphic relationships first, this would be the Severance Formation here. There are a bunch of inset Holocene age alluvial fills, but they all lie underneath the same geomorphic surface, which in this case would be the T1 terrace trend. Here's the picture of the Severance Formation, and the take-home point here is there are two Paleosols developed within it. This lower one is our MIS3 soil, and then there's another one that dates to sort of early MIS2. These are radiocarbon ages, so calibrated, we're looking at 30,000 at the top here, and then 21,000 here for that second period of soil development. And again, we've got BT horizons. There's even some evidence for some second sites. So take-home points. Aggradation during early to kind of mid MIS3. After about 37,000, that's when soil development starts. So about 7,000 years there of soil development, another pulse of aggradation, and then another period of photosynthesis. Might take a while to big pictures, so might take a while to advance these slides. So if we move slightly west to the Big Blue River, this is the coffee site. Here, Rolf attended some OSL ages. Turns out alluvium is pretty hard to date using OSL, but there is some consistency for what we've just seen at the Severance type section. So again, early MIS3, we've got river systems are grading. There's actually evidence for a sort of extra period of pedogenesis here. So two, we have three soils, but upward through kind of mid MIS3, we have soil formation, and then there's another pulse of aggradation, probably right before 29,000, and then that's a final period of pedogenesis up into early MIS2. This particular profile here is buried by historic alluvium. It's actually in the flood pool of the reservoir. But if you go further east, I think, this direction on the T2 tread, Rolf took a core. So here we have alluvial facies, so that would be the Severance Formation proper, but then it's mantled by loess. So here we actually have Gilman Canyon Formation. You can see the ages are very similar, and then Peoria loess on top. What's cool about this site, actually, and we can talk about this later, is there are buried archaeology about 70 centimeters down in the Severance Formation. So then the question is, how old is that? Well, it depends on which one of these ages do you believe. Do you believe it's 26 to 28,000? Or do you believe it's closer to 14? So, yeah, that's a discussion, but maybe over lunch. Okay, then we're going to jump quickly to the south here. So this is on the Niniscar River. This is a beautiful section. This is what it looked like when Rolf first investigated it. It does not look anywhere near like that now. Geomorphic relationships, it's a little bit different. So instead of one geomorphic surface, we now actually have a suite of terraces that step down toward the Niniscar River. So the Severance Formation is here beneath the T3 tread. But again, hopefully this picture should be pretty similar. We've got very similar ages here, 27,000 years ago, BT horizons, second pulse of aggradation, and then soil development. We also find the Severance Formation in alluvial fans and colluvial hill slopes. This is the Fox Creek Valley right here. So here's the example. You can see the sort of co-alluvial fans. There's a core that Rolf took, radiocarbon age, and calibrated as 27,000. So hopefully you can see these ages are seeing the same ages over and over again. This one is the South Fork of Big Nemaha. That's this one up here. So we have the alluvial facies. That's the Severance Formation proper, and then colluvial facies here. Again, very similar ages. This goes from 30,000 to 23. This one is on these two are on the Big Blue River. One side, we have the Paleosol, kind of dates to that earlier period of pedogenesis. And then at the other side, we have another Paleosol that dates to the late period of pedogenesis. Okay, let's summarize what we know for the Severance Formation. This would apply to the East Central Plains. All of the Paleosols have well-expressed BT horizons, brown to reddish-brown color, prismatic structure, clay films, iron and manganese oxide concentrations as well. And importantly, the ages for both the soils and the sediments that we've done have these consistent patterns. So river systems were grading during early MIS3, around about 40,000, that aggregation slows down, we get petagenesis, soil development up until roughly 30,000 years ago. And then in some river valleys again, there's the second pulse and the second period of petagenesis. So now let's hop to the west. So this is on the Cimarron River out here on the high plains of western Kansas. We're looking, this is our MIS3 age soil right here. And this is in this T2 fill, which actually is way high up in the landscape. So there's actually 15 meters of relief there between the T1, which would be a Holocene fill, these older fills right here. Here's a picture of the MIS3 soil. Radiocarbon ages, we've got, so OSL is starting at 58,000 there, so it's grading during the beginning of MIS3. And then radiocarbon ages, we've got 46 through 27 at the top, and then we have an OSL age of 30. So we'll just say roughly 30. So pretty consistent ages, even out west on the high plains. And then second pulse of aggradation again, very, very similar picture. So in terms of soil morphology, it's very similar. There are BT horizons, prismatic structure, but the main difference here is we actually start to get carbonates forming. So those are threads and filaments, fine threads and filaments in the A horizon, and then small carbonate nodules in the BTK horizons. Okay, so the take-home point from all of that is that mid to late MIS3 was this period of pervasive petagenesis across the central Great Plains. I've shown you all this data from stream valleys, but we've also seen already you can find it in other geomorphic settings, right? So Luss, I'm sure Peter and Joe probably have better pictures, but this is one I stole from Dan. Here's the Gilman Canyon Formation right here. So all across the central Great Plains, ages range from 44 to 24,000 years ago. We see similar things in the Aeolian dunes. So OSL ages have indicated dune stability between 40 and 30,000 years ago. You can go to Playas, which are these sort of ephemeral lakes that are all over the high plains. And again, they find pedocomplexes that date to Gilman Canyon Formation age, 42 to 28. So this period of pervasive landscape stability and soil formation. So what can we therefore do with these paleosols in terms of paleoenvironmental reconstructions? So there are several, let's talk about weathering first. So we have, I want to just contrast with just two sections. So we're going to use in the east, this is the severance type section, and then we're going to use that one we just looked at from the Cimarron River as our site to the west, just to kind of compare and contrast. So we have elemental geochemical data, and there are several of these weathering indices that have been widely used for decades now. So we have the chemical index of alteration and the chemical proxy of alteration. So both use aluminum as the immobile element, and then sodium, and in this case, calcium as mobile elements. Don't worry too much about the numbers. The important take-home point is that these numbers are higher in the east compared to the west, therefore implying greater chemical weathering. Now we can start to think about the other soil-forming factors, right? So what's actually driving that? Well, we have paramaterial values, so we can normalize for that. And then again, don't worry too much about the numbers, but these in the east are an order of magnitude higher than what we see in the west. So therefore implying greater chemical weathering. Not due to paramaterial changes. So therefore we can suggest, well, is it time or is it climate? The two most obvious ones for what's driving that. Well, if we believe the ages and we have sort of aggregation still going on here at 37,000, that's what, roughly 7,000 years for petagenesis. Here, it's actually probably longer because I believe this radiocarbon age at the bottom of the BT. So you could argue the soil must have longer to form, but the weathering values are less. Therefore, time is probably not, in fact, it cannot be what's making the drive this. So we would argue that climate is the main driver here of these differences. So that implies that during green isotope stage 3, there is still this like climatic gradient that exists across the central Great Plains. Now we can start to play some games because there are these geochemical transfer functions that have been developed, most of this by Nate Sheldon. So this, the equations 1, 2, and 4 rainfall. So for mean annual precipitation and mean annual temperature, those are using elemental geochemistry. And then this one's Greg Vitalik's one using depth to carbonate. So we can play around with these and see what we get. So for the east, we have values ranging from 800 to 1150 millimeters per year, temperature of 11.5 degrees C. In the east, in the west, pretty consistent, around 500 millimeters per year, and about 9 degrees C. If you then look at what are the modern values, admittedly, there are a lot of uncertainties of these equations, but what's fairly striking is that in general, what we get from these Paleosol-based proxies is very similar to what modern conditions are. And that's pretty sort of interesting take-home point there. Okay, so we also have, we did stable carbon isotope data. So this is looking at the relative abundance of C3, so cool season grasses, shrubs, trees versus C4, warm season grasses. In the east, MIS3, predominantly C3 biomass. Toward the kind of end of MIS3, you get some sort of mixed signal there, so there's at least a decent amount of C4, but not more than 50%. But in the west, dominated by C4 biomass. Again, very similar to what we find in modern conditions. So let me sort of summarize all of this, throw out a hypothesis. So what the soils tell us is that it's predominant landscape stability. That means that in the stream systems, at least, there are not huge floods going on. It's not like we see in the Holocene where we get a whole bunch of cut and fill cycles. So I just love this image. This is from Jim Knox in the 80s, and boy, Jim was right. So late Holocene into modern conditions, you have a whole bunch of Gulf moisture that's pumped up into the central Great Plains. Where that collides with these colder air masses, you get a whole bunch of frontal rainfall. So the majority of our rainfall now in the Great Plains comes during the summer months due to frontal activity, and it produces big floods. Now, Jim was contrasting this condition to what was going on sort of during the autothermal, which is roughly in the middle Holocene. That convergence zone was way to the south, which means that you have the strong westerly flow, which resulted in not big floods and drought conditions, primarily in the central Great Plains. And we would propose that this atmospheric circulation pattern is pretty much what you have for the majority of MIS3. And one possible mechanism for driving that could well be these meltwater discharges down the Mississippi River into the Gulf of Mexico. It kind of inhibits, therefore, these Gulf moisture sources. In fact, that same mechanism has been proposed for the Younger Dryas, another period where we don't see big floods in central Great Plains. So we are currently, I was hoping to have this data for this talk, but surprise, surprise, it's not available. One way we're testing this is we're looking at stable oxygen isotopes and hydrogen isotopes from clays in these paleosols. And we're hoping to be able to sort of compare those with particularly speleothem records. So there's Crevice Cave over in Missouri. There's even one in New Mexico, but I forget the name. There are further ones out west. But again, those records seem to suggest, at least particularly for the sites out in the western Great Basin, that there's that's where you get all these pluvial lakes forming during MIS3, and they're arguing that it's dominantly winter precipitation, but it's Pacific moisture sources. So we're already hoping to sort of be able to tease apart, at least for the central Great Plains, what is Pacific, which would have lighter isotopic signatures compared to what is Gulf, which would have heavier isotopic signals. And yeah, that's all I have. I have no idea if I'm on time, but I know you guys want to get to lunch, so I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Again, we'll carry that conversation on at lunch, but just in case, Sergey.
I would be happy to ask question, but unfortunately, I did not see all the slides. There was no change of slides in our screen. But maybe we could discuss later by email or other way.
Copy of the presentation to you as well.
Okay, good. Good. All right. Blake, are you going to stay in here during lunch? Okay, so you can leave your computers and stuff in here. Will be here during lunch. And Maria, you have a ticket for everyone, right?
Yeah, I will see
that. They can go to Taos. Okay. Anybody have one? Sure. Anyway, the cafeteria is right.
I thought makes sense.
Yes. I have a question, but I will give you.
It's very good.
So we'll change the next presenter, and next presenter will be Fatima Kurbanova. She'll tell us about the genesis of the MIS-5 Paleosol of Kazne section. Fatima, please.
Hello. 1 second.
Yes.
You can see my slide. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I can start. Yes. Okay. So yes. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night to everybody. We will speak today about Discaucasia, the Los Paleosol sequences, and what we went from them and what we got. The mineral dust aerosol is correlated with climate conditions on the Earth in general and specific planets regions, and the dust accumulation in environmental paleoarchives such as loess or lucky strand deposits reflect the intensity of aeolian processes and the climate's humidity. And in the south part of the East European plain, in the Discaucasia, there are vast areas of loess deposits that continuously cover the territory from the Caspian to the Azov Sea. Here, the total thickness of this loess deposits can reach 150 to 200 meters. And the thickness of the upper Pleistocene loess in the east of the region reaches more than 50 meters, which is a record for European loess. And such high sedimentation rates make it possible to provide a highly detailed paleoreconstructions based on serial of OSL dating, lithological and geochemical analysis in complex. But the composition of loess and thickness is heterogeneous across the territory, and so it is complicated to study these loess paleosol sequences. And regarding regional paleogeography, it seems to be the great interest to extract the following information of significant changes in hydroclimatic characteristics of East European plain out of loess paleosol sequences, and the area of glacier cover, the river flow volume, the average annual temperature and precipitation of the Caspian and Black Seas level. And stratigraphically, the loess paleosol series of the Discaucasia can claim the role of regional stratitype sections for middle and upper Pleistocene. And the loess paleoarchives of Discaucasia contain a detailed and almost continuous record of landscape changes for the last 800,000 years. And the loess paleosol sequences of Discaucasia are unevenly studied from the paleosol point of view. And mostly it is studied in cores, but not in exposures. not in soil profiles. So here you can see two different locations of these Los Paleosol sequences on the west of the region and on the east of the region. And in the east of the region, the level of knowledge is significantly lower, especially for the late Pleistocene Paleosols, which is we are not previously studied in outcrops, but only in cores. And at the same time, in the east of the region, as a result of high rates of sedimentation, the thickness of these Los Paleosol sequences is significantly higher. So here the Los and soils are more compact, but in that Kaznet section in the east of the region, they are more thick, and we can provide more detailed reconstruction. But Loses and Paleosols are more preserved here. Here you can see different sources of the dust input. For example, it is open aeolian sands and covered sands also. So, and the direction of wind is from the east to the west. That's why here Los Paleosol sections series, they are more thick than in the east, and we can prove it also by different analysis from different cores. So you can see here in the Azov region a really shallow profile up to 6 meters. And then with correlation, of course, with dates, we prove that that here MIS5 pedocomplex is much thicker in the east side. And also we can see here in cores, in thickness of cores, then that in the east of the region it is high, up to 33 meters, and only 6 meters in the west of the region. So, and another problem with this dust input is that it wasn't only in middle and upper Pleistocene, but it is also going right now. So we have dust storms, and they are the largest contribution to modern dust accumulation, and less accumulation are going right now. It's continuous. And the development of the dust accumulation associated with autumn-spring drought and strong eastern winds. So here is a total duration of dust storms. And it could be also visible at satellite images. For example, here is a clean atmosphere. And on the other pictures, you can see the dust storms with this dust and silt direction from the Caspian lowland to the Ciscaucasia. And it could be also visible at this infrared channel image. So this is the actual map where we started our 2 hour sections of MIS5 Paleosols. It is in Atkazne region. Here we can't find this MIS5 soils. That's why we provide new soil profiles. And methods that we used are laser granulometer, spectrophotometer, and colorimeter to identify soil levels of soil of pedogenesis, loss of ignition that correlates good with organic matter and calcium carbonates, magnetic susceptibility to identify frequency dependence. Also, we provide micromorphological investigations to understand the conditions of pedogenesis, and elemental analysis to provide a chemical indexes analysis also. And here are some results. For example, here we can see surface soil. It is our reference soil to correlate with the soil with Paleosols. It is the location of the soil is 2 meters to other soils, MIS5, and we can see here just accumulation of humic horizon, of organic matter, and accumulation of frequent dependence, frequency independence, and dark molic horizon. And we identified the soil as Kashtanazem. And we also noticed some soil on the level of 2 meters, but we don't know what is the soil. We don't have here dates right now. We found the 2 soils, Krutsa and Salin soils. It is a meson-beta complex for the first time that was studied for the first time for Atkazne, for key section Atkazne. And we studied here morphological features, and we tried to find the differences between these 2 soils and to understand what was the climate look like in these soils. Here we can see it is a Krutsa soil, and we can see here a really high level of magnetic susceptibility, but it is related, this peak is related with tephra deposits, because despite of high magnetic susceptibility, we have here low frequency dependence. That means that it is a tephra signal, not paleopedological signal. And also we have accumulation of intensification of magnetic susceptibility and frequency dependence here in saline paleosoil. We also studied micromorphology to scan different thin sections from these sites, but to assess the porosity, for example, and other features. But we only studied it. So that's why we don't have results of these scanning sections. And so we can see the 3 soils: Holocene soil, Krutsa, Paleosol MIS5C, and MIS5E soil. So we can see here that the molic horizon in Holocene soil and in saline soil well developed. However, in MIS5C soil, we don't have such thick humic horizon. And we think that it is more interstitial soil, and the soil is more developed. And in Krutsa Paleosols, we also found a lot of iron manganese concretions on the one hand, and on the other hand, we also found a lot of gypsum, but it is of course lithological gypsum that was incorporated to the soil, and it is hard to recognize pedogenic signal here from lithological signal. And also another MIS5E soil, we think that it was formed in alternating wet and arid conditions because we have a lot of calcium carbonate neoformations here, and on the other hand, we have a lot of iron manganese concretions and fillings with iron manganese concretions. So that's why the soil contains both periods. Maybe it was formed in different stages in a wet environment and then in arid environment. But however, at the same time, the number of visible forms of calcium carbonates are higher than in crude Paleosol and even more than in modern soil. And in modern soil, we didn't find any gypsum near formations, but here there was a lot of them. So it is also a question, was the environment of MIS 5E soil more arid, or it just a lithological signal? And also we studied elemental analysis, and that showed that, for example, barium to strontium ratio correlates very well with frequency dependence of magnetic susceptibility and with clay fraction. And we think that this index can be used also as an additional indicator of the intensity of soil formation in loess. And at the same time, zirconium to yttrium ratio correlates with coarse dust fraction. And it also can be used as an additional indicator of dust input. And the brief conclusion is that we think that MIS 5C, so Paleosol, reflects a more intense dust input, and it is similar to interstitial sol. It was Cambisol, as we think we identified the soil as a Cambisol. And MIS 5E soil reflects warmer conditions and characterized by lower rates of sedimentation compared to the other soil. And humic horizon is darker here, and soil is more rich in carbonates, but macromorphological conditions also points to alteration of wet and dry conditions. And this soil we identified as Kashtanazem, as modern soil. So thank you for your attention, and I'm open to your questions.
Thank you. Is there any questions? We started 5 minutes later. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. Please, yes.
I may have missed you saying something about this, but is there a connection between rise and fall and level of the Caspian Sea and source material availability for the loess?
Good question.
In the change of the sea level and accumulation of dust input. Yes?
Yes.
Yes, I can't answer this question, unfortunately. We don't provide this correlation, but it is a really good question, and it is very interesting. I will research this question. Thank you so much.
Yes,
maybe not question, but the remark. Probably you will publish the data, very interesting data, so you should reconsider the naming of one of soils. You use the name calcic, gypsic, cambisol. Whereas if you check the criteria, if you have calcic horizon, gypsic horizon, must to stop in gypsy soils or calci soils. You cannot go to cambisols. So something is wrong in this name. In cambisols, we have only gypsiric and calcaric, means primary. But if you recognize secondary calcic and gypsic, it must be something, maybe something. You simply must reconcile all the how to say elements of this name. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, yes, please.
Thank you, Fatima. And regarding the gypsum and your thin sections that you consider as primary, we have also to take in mind that they are very soluble. So maybe there are cases of solubilization and rain precipitation. So in this case, gypsum is also a secondary mineral.
So, and it will be gypsic cambisol or not?
Gypsic.
Gypsic calcifer. I don't know.
Because there are many questions, so
Yes.
I suggest just to reconcile.
Just to look
each
carefully
level
on the
is decided.
classification, yeah.
Primary, secondary, this and this,
Yeah.
and find solution, because probably not coming.
Thank you for your remark. Yeah, it's important.
Thank you. Yeah, it is also was questions to other presenters, and it was interesting to listen to the consideration about soil classification, because it's really complicated. But thank you, yes, for your remarks.
So thank you, Fatima. Let's move forward. And next presenter will be Farhad Khormali. Please, Farhad.
Yeah, good afternoon. It's 1 a.m. in Iran now. I don't know if there is anybody, but yeah, thank you for organizing this conference, Maria and Curtis. Also, support for attending this conference. I'm going to talk about, let's say, 10 to 15 years working on the Iranian northern Iran loss Paleosols, and initiated by my colleagues, German colleagues, Professor Martin Kell, Manfred Freschen, and also during this course of time, there were about 15 PhD students worked on these topics. Yeah, as we see here, loss is covering more than 10% of the land area that were important. And Cesar, we are also happy to close the gap between the Eurasian loss and the Chinese loss plateau. And there are not many work before now we started working in this area. Yeah. So the paleogenesis and formation of the soil along the bioclimo sequence, so-called climo and vegetation differences, our interest in the region, and always try to look at the soils, as Sergei Guryachin said, important to look at the soils spatial
reason that they're not seeing it online.
So there was a provenance study by Tom Stevens and his PhD student. We took a sample from here, loss, and they compared Volga loss also and found that these this area cannot be the origin for the other side of the Caspian Sea, based on the provenance studies. Yeah. Besides the loss, which is seen in the so-called Iranian loss plateau, and here we have a loss area, extensive loss area with 70-meter thickness. We have also taxial loss on this is Alborz mountain ranges. We have loss also accumulated in the northern foot slopes of Alborz, where we have a Hyrcanian forest region. And these lines show the history of the Caspian Sea during the 40,000 years ago. We have a early Hualinian transgression up to 50-meter high, then late Hualinian transgression and Neo-Caspian transgression. And we have sand dunes in the area. These are the Barkhane-like or parabolic sand dunes that we investigated. We dated them, and they aged about 10,000 years, and with a lot of sand and also the Caspian Sea sediments. So they are very young comparing the age of the lost deposits in the neighborhood. But this lowland of the Caspian Sea could be one of the source areas for the loss accumulated here in northeastern, where Kobatov and Alborz mountain close kind of a cap here. And also this Alborz mountain stops the sediment from moving. And as I said, these sand dunes investigated are about 10,000 years. And we have a couple of sections here. And as long as they go away from the Caspian Sea, they are older, 10,000, 9,000, and 8,000 years. So these are also interesting to study. But there is not clear soil formation we found in these sand dunes, except very thin layers of carbonate crusts. So that could be also an indication of the soil and kind of a formation of the soil. So the area is unique in terms of ecological gradient. From here to the north, where the Turkmenistan border is, we have about 60, 70 kilometer. But in this 60 kilometer, we have 800 millimeter precipitation difference, from more than 800 in this forest area to less than 200. And interestingly, there is only 1 degree differentiation in temperature. We have 17 degrees centigrade, and here we have 18. So it's very interesting to study the effect of precipitation and also vegetation. And we have this transect from mountainous areas to the border, where we have different forest vegetation, more than 800 millimeter, and their steppe region, typical steppe, and then dry steppe, and finally the Solonchak soils, where we have desert and the border with Turkmenistan. So it's a beautiful climo-biosequence. We have arid, xeric, and unique moisture regimes, and we have a differentiation or gradient of the precipitation, not only from north to south, but also from east to the west. We have also about 150 or 200 millimeter difference rainfall, and major soil forming processes see here from arid to the most humid is salinization, soil structure development, gypsum redistribution, organic matter accumulation, redistribution of carbonate, mineral weathering, and also clay alluviation, and so on. So these are the soils from the most arid to the humid regions. And we have Turriortens, Rigosols, Haplozeref, Cambisol. And we have also Castanozems, Calcigerals, Argigerals, Chernozem-like soils, and Alphisols finally. So these are the zonal soils formed on the loess along this climate sequence. And these are only the representative. We have a lot of other repetitions to make sure that these soils are formed on the loess along this sequence. And if you look at the silt content of the sea horizon, you see that there is a minor difference from north to south or from dry to the humid region, usually they fall about 60 to 70% of the silt content, and the clay and sand is lower than 20%. But in the developed soils, in the developed horizons, we have less silt by increasing moisture and higher clay, which indicates the pedogenesis happening. And this is a comparison of the clay content versus the sea horizon along this gradient. And this shows the carbonate. In the more arid regions, we don't see the leaching of carbonate, but in the subhumid to humid regions, we have a lot of depletion of and accumulation of carbonate deeper in the soil column. So, yeah, organic carbon increase, and clay pH also decrease. This is a very optimum pH for decalcification and clay alluviation, of course, we know in the soil. Another feature which is more stable proxy helpful is clay mineralogy, where light and chloride is dominant in the parent dust. But again, we move from arid to the iodic moisture regime or more humid areas, increase in the smectite content in the most xeric moisture regimes, and also in the forested area where we have higher leaching, depotassification, and more vermiculite in the soil. Magnetic susceptibility of these soils, left to right, again, increase in the humidity, is well corresponding with the moisture availability of the soil. And they are very well correlated with mean annual precipitation here you see, and also well correlated with the Chinese modern soils and also the Russian steppe modern soils, the signatures of magnetic susceptibility. And interesting feature we also investigated is the stable isotope carbon in the bulk carbonate. This is inorganic carbon stabilized content. And also we tried to pick pedogenic carbonate and look at the isotope carbon, which we believe that even more reliable than bulk carbonate. You see in these arid soils, the signal of the greens are the carbon isotope carbon, the bulk carbonate. You see they are very close to the signal of lithologic carbonate, limestone. But moving to the more humid regions, the signal also well matches with the present day vegetation and the climate. And this indicates that already, while deposition of the loss, we have seen genetic soil formation happening, and the signal of carbonate in the bulk soil, they are not easily could be related to the parent, let's say limestone or parent carbonate, but they are already pedogenic. So that's why they also very close to the signal of pedogenic carbonate. So we believe that during the time of loss deposition, we have seen genetic formation of the soil also. And that's why in the micromorphology also we have, most of the time it's difficult to see a pure loss. We see some pedogenic activities in the loss. And now micromorphology also proves this hypothesis that we have even in the very dry regions, we have some pedofeatures related to the bioturbation, formation of the channels, and excremental pedofeatures. This is a new formation of gypsum. And of course, in the more moisture availability condition like this Chernozem or frozen, we have bioturbation, this is experimental pedofeatures, even clay migration and movement, formation of the BT. And this is a very abrupt change, abrupt differentiation of the carbonate. Above this line, there is almost 3 to 4% carbonate, but here we have more than 30%. So huge leaching of carbonate happens. And in the forested regions, we have very well developed alphisols with the BT horizon almost devoid of carbonate. So what we do is to try to quantify micromorphology using indices. This is a MISECA index, micromorphological index of soil evolution under calcareous conditions. So we use microstructure, B-fabric, clay coating, decalcified zone, alteration degree of mineral, iron, and manganese oxides. To reach to the numbers, of course, we need to do a lot of replications, and a lot of thin sections should be developed, not to, but it is kind of reliable, and you see that in the BT horizons, we have higher numbers close to the well-developed soils. The maximum number is 24, so these are well-developed soils. But in the drier regions, we have non-developed to very weakly developed, and of course, we correlated this index to the other soil proxies like iron and manganese oxides, color index, clay mineralogy, and clay irradiation index, even to clay minerals. Content of clay minerals also well correlated with MISECA, and also magnetic susceptibility. So we model and develop this micromorphological index to the precipitation that we believe that precipitation is the main forcing factor in the differentiation of soils in this region, at least. And this model could be developed and used for the paleosols. Now, quickly, a couple of slides on the paleosols. I'm not going to give detailed investigation of this. There are published studies already, but this is the NECA section from more humid region. So I'm going to compare NECA with Upland. In the more dry regions, we have paleosols formed along the Alborz foot slopes, where we have wet and humid nowadays, but also we have in the Iranian loess plateau, we have arid to semi-arid loess. But they are really different, we call it two different loess provinces in the northern Iran. So you see here, we mainly have 24, 25 meter of the loess deposited along Alborz mountain slopes, but in the Iranian plateau, it reaches to 70 meters here. And we have a whole lot of paleosols formed, like decalcification clay domains and formation of very well-developed BT horizons in these sections. This is another section, Toshan section, again in the Alborz foot slope. This is one of the most complete sections, down to 130 to 40,000 here. So this shows different paleosols, MIS stage 5, very well developed soils you can see here, and formation of the clay coating and very well developed soils in this section. But this is Upland section where we have 70 meters of the thickness. Interestingly, there is not a single developed or well-developed paleosol we could find. At least there is only one BW horizon in this area. And another feature is there is a 80,000 years of hiatus here happened. So it is either related to the less accumulation rate of the loss or to the erosion. We don't know that. But what we find is there is no paleosol or very, very well developed. So this is well matching with the present day arid climate. There is no well-developed paleosols here in the soil. Only we have gypsum, and there are some banded loess with a finer material in this soil. And if you look at the grain size, this one is the Upland, this loess sequence I talked about, and it has larger grain size, and it's unimodal. It shows that there is no paleogenic differentiation, or there was more or less the same source happening to the deposition of the loess in the area, but all the Alborz mountain foot slope loess, they are bimodal, and either it is related to the syngenetic soil formation while deposition of the loess, and also it could be related to the different source material during the deposition of the loess. But they are all in the Alborz mountain range. They are finer also. So if you look at the average, they are finer than the Upland loess section. Also, it is kind of acceptable if we say there is a source in the north, and then we go to the south to the Alborz mountain range, there is 80, 100 kilometer, then we are finer material sedimented.